Okay. Good to go. Thank you. We are live. We are live. We were live yesterday as well, but we ended up hitting some major turbulence and some technical issues there with everything, with the network, with the power, with the every daggone thing. So, I apologize for that. Okay. Thank you, Sharon. All right. So we are back. We're good. Technical difficulties have been solved. We are here. We are live. We are talking today about all-in-one relocations, our end of year special, which is designed to bring people over and make them rich at the same time. So it's a beautiful thing. We have a bit of a different, I suppose, perspective on relocations because the law firm does so many offshore trust funds and so many generational wealth trust funds that we tend to look at everything through the lens of wealth and wealth creation. So our specials tend to be a bit different in that they normally open the door to generational wealth and wealth creation at the same time, not just relocation. So in this special, let me see what I can do here. This special is pretty cool because it also includes a house. And we have designed this house for this special. So it's priced into this special. You can always change the house, but it will break you out of the special pricing. Let's see here if I can find it. Now I know. That's pretty odd. All right. Let me resend the picture of the house. I could have swore I just did that, but let's do it again. There it is. Wait a minute. Is this one of those? All right, so let's see. Is that what it is? Yeah, that is what it is. All right. All right. So TikTok can see our architect's 3D rendering. Let me do something over here for you on the. Oh, that's really difficult, isn't it? So the YouTube green screen function is actually not very intuitive. Oh, okay. All right, there is an intuitive mode. I thought that was a bit weird. Let's go ahead and get you squared away as well. There you go. All right. So, YouTube, you also have it. Facebook, I can't do a green screen with you unless, let's see. Uh-oh. All right, there we go. Facebook, I can't do a green screen with you unless I use a third-party app. So, unfortunately, that's a limitation of Facebook. YouTube, you can kind of see what's going on there. I guess if I cover the camera, then you see it a little better. You can kind of see the designed house for this particular special. But of course, the YouTube scaling sucks compared to the TikTok scaling, as always. So what you have here On the TikTok side, I can kind of show a little bit better. Upstairs here, you have two bedrooms, and there's actually a upstairs family room and this veranda up here at the front. On the downstairs, you have your living room over here. Around, across the back there, you have your kitchen dining room. And in the front there, you have a library, office, or possibly another bedroom if that's what you want to do. So you could turn this into a three bedroom if you have no use for any of the extra rooms, right? So two bedroom, two in suite bathrooms, and then you would have an additional bathroom downstairs near the library or the office, or you could have three bedrooms in suites. And then, of course, you lose that additional family area. It is 1,500 and something like 94 square feet. So that's why you'll see in all of the kind of advertisements that it says approximately 1,600. It's like 6 square feet away from 1,600 square feet. And yeah, and that's it. 2 stories. So very simple, kind of basic, got you going, bare bones type of situation there, but good enough to make things happen for you. It doesn't take up a huge profile on the 50 by 100 plot. So there's enough space on the plot to do landscaping. There's enough space to have a really cool pool, to have a really great backyard, like whatever it is that you want to do, there's enough space there for you to do it. So the profile of the house on the plot is almost exactly a third of the plot. So you can have as much space in the back as you have in the front, if that's the way you want to position it. And it depends on the sizing of the plot, of course, right? So in a rectangular plot, you would have just as much space in the front as the back. In a square plot, you would just have a ton of space like around the house if you wanted to position it that way. Some people just want to strip in the back. They don't want a whole lot in the back. They want a whole lot in the front. Some people want nothing in the front. You park in the front and there's nothing else, and then they have a playground in the back where they do really great landscaping out there, and they have outdoor barbecue grills and pools and all kinds of stuff in the back. So that really just depends on what you want to do next. Landscaping is not included. But this is the house that will be constructed for you on the land that is included. So the end of year special does include the house, does include land, all of it new built. The land, of course, is going to be purchased for you. The land is in Deaney Beach, so you got to be wanting to come live at the beach where I live. If not, then you're not doing the end of year special, and you'll have separate pricing. So you can live wherever you want, but the pricing is based off of the land that's available here at the beach. So you get the land, you get this house that you're seeing now, but most importantly, you get the bond ladder, which means that you don't have to work. Okay, once you get the bond ladder is going to be paying you a minimum of 50,000 local currency per month. And since you already have the house, you already have the land, your monthly expenses should not be too large. Okay, so you're going to get a trust fund. You're going to get a family trust fund to manage everything. All right, so you get a family trust fund. You're going to get the land in Deaney Beach. You're going to have this house built for you from the ground up. You're going to have your immigration paperwork done from your host country to here. And you'll have all your other legal obligations done by our law firm as well. And then we'll be there guiding you through until dual citizenship. So for the next 7 years, our law firm will be there making sure that you maintain your qualifications up until you are ready for your dual citizenship. So all of that comes in at 185,000. Hey, how's it going from Texas? I know that's right. I know that's right. The ladder alone makes it worth it. The bond ladder alone makes it worth it, because the bond ladder is going to last you anywhere from 10 to 20 years. We target 10 years and we target 50,000. But we showed yesterday what last year's clients are making, and none of them are making 50,000. They're all making way over 50,000. So we target 50,000 a month and we target 10 years, but most of them are getting 20 years and they're all making over 50,000 a month. In passive income, mind you, that's pure passive income. They can still work if they want. They can do whatever else they want to do if they want. It's pure passive income. Remember, we look at things through the lens of generational wealth over here. That's really what sets us apart. Other people do relocations, and are really, really good at other things. We are really, really good at generational wealth. That's what we do. So, yes. Let me show you. We can come back to the house if need be, but let me show you what our folks did last year. So, this is the breakdown. Actually, let's get into what they bought, what we bought them last year. So, this is the breakdown of last year's clients, right? And what they got in all 6 tranches, right? Now remember, we had spoke about this before, where we spoke about let me fix this for YouTube as well so you can see what we're talking about here. Where we spoke about you need 6 bonds in order to ladder, because bonds pay out twice a year. 3-bedroom, 2-bath in that house. It can be 3-bedroom, 3.5-bath, right? So the downstairs has a library or family room or whatever you want to use it for. That's the same size as the master bedroom, exactly the same size, and it does have its own bathroom. So if you wanted it to be a bedroom, you would have a downstairs bedroom and 2 upstairs bedrooms, and then all you would have is like your kitchen, your living room, right? So if you're cool with that, like the bare bones, cool. If you'd rather have 2 bedrooms and then an extra space downstairs for, I don't know, a man cave. I've seen people use library. I've seen people do libraries, computer rooms. There's a guy who does voiceovers, and he turned it into his voiceover studio, office. So that room is kind of up to whatever you want it to be, but can have a full bath in it regardless. All right, so we're talking about in order to get the waterfall going on the bonds, you need 6 of them because they pay out twice a year, right? And in order to ladder properly, your professional team has to choose those bonds in such a way where there's no gap months, right? So 1 bond pays you twice a year every 6 months. So these are the bonds that the clients got last year. In tranche A, we put $1 million local currency into the SDB1 2011 30-year bond. That bond was out in January and July, and this was 12% return on investment. That was the lowest ROI out of all of the bonds that were purchased for those clients. So 12% lowest ROI, and it paid out in January and July. Tranche B was the big boy, the IFB1 2022 infrastructure bond, which means it's tax exempt. That's what infrastructure bonds mean. You pay no taxes on it. All right, 18.4607%. 18.4607%, tax free. Pays out in February and August. Beautiful bond, love it. All right, tranche C was fixed deposit bond, which is the typical bond that's available. FXD1 2024 10-year bond, 16% ROI on that. It is taxable, 10% withholding tax, which is your standard tax. Pays out in March and September. FXD1 2022 15-year bond, 13.942%. Has a 10% withholding tax. Pays out in April and October. FXD1 2018 25-year bond, 13% ROI on that. Pays out in May and November. Has withholding tax of 10%. IFB, that means infrastructure bond. IFB1 2022 6-year bond. Infrastructure bonds are sometimes shorter, but they're worth it because they're tax-free. Pays out in June and December. So that's how the bond structure went for them, how the payouts worked, right? In February, I'm sorry, in January, they received a gross payout of 60,000. All right. Again, remember everything's over 50 million, right? And we target 50 million on the gross side, and everything is over 50 million. So gross payout 60,000. Even after taxes, it was 54,000. They still beat the target of 50. Okay. Then here comes the big boy in February, the infrastructure bond, tax exempt. Gross payout was 92,303.50. There is no tax deduction, so payout was 92,303.50. Next month, March. All right, FXD1, 80,000 gross, 8,000 withholding tax. So what hit their bank account was 72,000. April, 69,710 gross. 10% withholding was 6,971. What hit their bank account 62,739. All right, May, 67,000 gross. All right, there was a withholding tax of 6,700. What hit their bank account 60,300. June, next infrastructure bond 66,075 gross. There was no taxes, so they got 66,075 to hit their bank account. July, it starts over, right? Every it pays out twice a year, every 6 months. So in July, all those payments started again at exactly the same amount. Okay, so that's how it works. Okay, very, very simple. These are regular government treasury bonds, right? They're guaranteed by sovereign debt. Okay, and so that's what allows you to be rich as soon as you relocate. What is rich? Rich means your passive income. These are all passive payments from the government, right? You bought the bonds. They're making these payments for the life of the maturity of the bond. Payments that come to you for doing no work. That's called passive income. All right. These are all passive income payments. You don't have to do any work once you buy them. And the passive income has to exceed your monthly burn rate. So remember, our base is assuming a monthly burn rate of 50,000. If your burn rate is higher, then you have to buy more bonds. So then you have to change your pricing, right? But in order to be rich, your passive income has to exceed your monthly burn rate. All right. So these payments, all of these passive incomes that came in from these government bonds have to exceed what you spend every month. That is rich. Wealth is the next step, right? Wealth and rich are not the same thing. This allows you to be rich. This frees things up so that you can now pursue wealth if you so choose, right? But when we relocate people, we try to relocate them for success, not set them up for failure, right? And so being able to relocate them with no job needed, no stress looking for money, none of that stuff, sets them up for success. So what we want to happen is we want that the 50,000 or whatever your real number is, right? We don't necessarily want you to shrink yourself. We want you to, sit down with our people and figure out what your real number is. But for most people, 50,000 works, right? I have a full staff on 2 different sites, and I spend less than 100,000. I have a full staff. I got live-in employees that live at my sites, at both sites. I have an employee that lives at my farm. I have employees that live here in my own house. All of that, right? So for us, we spend a little bit more than that, but we only spend about 80,000 a month. What does that say? 50Ks in USD? No. 50Ks in Kenyan shillings. Yeah. If it was in USD, then you'd be able to utilize this and just stay in the US, right? So it's one of those things. The difference is it's literally the same thing that people can do in the US, and it's actually at the same numbers. The currency is just different, right? So after your brokerage fees and your legal fees and all of that stuff, the amount of money that gets invested on the Kenyan side is 6 million local currency. So now think to yourself, wait a minute, if I had $6 million to invest, could I stop working and live off the interest of the investment? Yes. Absolutely, right? So it becomes one of those things. Once you move here, you don't want to do too many conversions, right? You don't want to do too many. How much is that in US dollars? Because you'll crush your money. Don't do that, right? And that doesn't matter where you are. whether you, yeah, I used to live in China, and the first like 3 months that I lived in China, I was doing conversions in my head. How many is that in U.S. dollars? Oh yeah, that ain't nothing but $5. Messed myself up, right? You don't want to get into the but that ain't but $20. That ain't but $50. Mm-mm. You need to get into whatever the local currency is and figure out what that is and move forward from there. Once you move to a place on vacation, you can do that, no problem. But that's not sustainable if you're going to live in a place, right? So once you convert that currency, it works the same way, right? The things that it doesn't work the same way on are imports, which is actually the same in the United States, right? There's not a real way to change the price of an import because it costs what it costs. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, yeah, definitely got to change the mindset. Once you move, if it's just a vacation, whatever. But once you move, got to change that mindset. You got to get into local currency. I always say it's like 40%, right? So 50,000 local currency buying power wise, think of that as having like almost like 25,000 of wherever you're coming from, right? Without imports, right? So you can think to yourself like, oh, I can buy a Toyota for 25,000. Oh yeah, but it costs the same. It's an import, right? Toyota sets the price. So anything that's an import, get that out of your head. But food, shelter, clothing, like your local things that you can access locally, your spending power is about the same. There's folks that actually hey Wanje. There's folks that actually I completely lost my train of thought. I apologize. What was I saying? Jeez. Sorry, it's early here. But anyway, yeah, you want to make sure all of your local stuff that's not imported is going to have that local price attached to it, right? Like for us, all of our food, well, the food that we don't grow, we do grow a lot of food on the farm, but we're not professional farmers. It's just a hobby. So the food that we don't go, we go to the local farmers market, get food there, and we pay the standard. We actually pay a little bit of an inflated price because we live in a tourist area. But even that, probably monthly, if I were to do the calculation into the US, food might cost $100 a month. It's not much. Clothes, the same thing. It's not much. Only when you import things are you going to pay the same price. And there are some things that I've imported because they're not in the local market. Typically, like cappuccino machines, like the one I wanted. I could have bought a cappuccino machine here, but the specific one I wanted wasn't in the market, so I imported it. Blah 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 blah. When you import, pro tip: when you import, if you're going to utilize something like Amazon to import, which is good because they do direct duty paid shipping. So that means that when it gets to you, the taxes for KRA are already paid. You don't have to bother with that. But if you're going to use them, then make sure you use the UK version so that the plug fits. Okay, US version is going to be a different voltage and the plug is not going to fit in the wall. And when you plug it in, it might blow up. All right, pro tip. Know the voltage in the country that you're going to. All right. So you're saying with the house bond money, 50, it might be. You got to sit down and figure out what is going on with you, right? For most people, they're cool with the 50K. Like they're good because they already own a house. You got to remember, you're also getting a house. So you own your land, you own the house. The house has a borehole, so you're not paying for water, right? You can upgrade the solar. Solar doesn't come with the house, but you can upgrade the solar or you can get a diesel backup pretty inexpensively. So you may not be dealing with Kenya Power, right? You may have your own off-grid house. You don't have an electric bill. You don't have a sewage bill because we install biodigesters. So there's no sewage bill or nothing like that. So you own your own house and have very little bills, if any at all. If it's agricultural land, which most of the land we deal with is, you don't even have property tax, right? Agricultural land has no property tax. So you don't have any property taxes. You may not have an electric bill. You don't have a sewage bill. You don't have a water bill, right? And you own your own house already. You're good to go. You can also upgrade and get like a car as well. So you have everything you need and you have very little overhead bills. So essentially it's internet, electric, if you're getting electric, food, and shelter, is already covered. So It's what you eat every month, the internet you use every month, the if you got Netflix and all that stuff. It's the BS bills. Like all of your necessities are covered. You've already bought them, right? So now you think about like, okay, if I have one utility bill being electric, and then all that, and then it's just food and clothing, and I'm bringing clothes with me. I ain't showing up naked, you know what I mean? So it's just, my daily bill is essentially food. How much is that going to cost me? And then I'm getting 50,000 a month, from the government. And as you can see, there was only 1 month where it even came close to actually getting 50,000 a month. Most months they got 60,000 or more, right? 1 month they almost got 100,000 in that 1 month, right? To spread across the entire year, right? And that's twice. They got paid that twice because every payment you get from the bond waterfall, you get the exact same payment twice a year. So it's over 100,000 they got, on that bond per year. It's over 100,000 they got on every bond per year because every single bond was more than 50,000. You see how the math works? And it's all post-tax money, right? And all that money was earned, quote unquote, earned inside of Kenya, right? So what does that qualify you for? Maybe go talk to your tax person and ask them about foreign earned income exclusion. How much is the foreign earned income exclusion? Currently, it's $130,000. $130,000 earned overseas for Americans is exempted from your taxes. So Americans have to file a tax return everywhere, no matter where they live. That does not mean that they have to pay taxes. It just means that they have to file a tax return, right? So if your money ain't coming from America and it's under $130,000 a year, there's a good chance that you have a foreign earned income exemption. It means you don't have to pay the taxes, right? It means that income isn't even taxable. So talk to your CPA if you're an American to see how that works. If you're not an American, then it probably doesn't matter because you're probably not taxed on your worldwide income unless you're a tax resident of your home country, which that'll disappear 183 days after you leave typically. So by the time it's tax time, you won't be a tax resident there anymore, and that'll be the end of that because you've relocated. You'll be a tax resident here. All right. Okay. So that is how that works. Now, those were last year's bonds, right? So you guys are going to get into next year's bonds, you guys who are onboarding with this year's special. But last year, they didn't get a house because if you guys have been following us, you guys have seen that we went to China and we made material deals with our Chinese suppliers. We were in China for over a month just a couple months ago. If you missed that, go back and check the TikToks and wherever you're watching us from and see all of the work that we did in China. We did a lot of work. Stayed there for a month. Did a whole bunch of new supplier deals and all of that. So that's why we can afford to build you a house because we bring the container in from China based on these new deals that we got. So we're able to bring in better quality and still be able to provide you with great prices because of all the work we did a couple months ago in China. Yeah, it was great. The doors, the windows, even the tiles. Yeah, we even did tile deals. So even the bathroom tiles, the floor tiles, backsplash tiles, and all of that. We even got really great deals on that. So the stairs, the tiles, the windows, for smart house upgrades, all of the smart stuff. So even the smart toilet we're bringing in from China, which is crazy. Like you talk to the toilet and it talks back to you. It's wild. There's a video of that. Talk to the toilet, tell it to clean you, it cleans you. Tell it to clean the bowl, it cleans the bowl. Heat up the seat. Does everything but a massage. Pretty crazy. Ooh, that's a good question. All right, so not all of our clients are relocatees. That's a great question. All right, so What about our generational wealth clients? We have two types of generational wealth clients. We have generational wealth clients that are just generational wealth clients, and then we have Kenyans in the diaspora who are trying to protect their children. A very different client, right? So the Kenyans in the diaspora who are trying to protect their children understand that when they die, there's going to be a scramble for their land. It happens very often to Kenyans living in the diaspora, right? So what they do is they utilize our trust services and they put all of the land that their kids are going to inherit. Their kids are typically Americans or Canadians or British, right? And so they don't understand the intricacies of life here in Kenya. And so they know when they die, some random cousin, some random auntie is going to try to steal their land. And sometimes it gets nasty. Like sometimes they'll threaten your kids and all of that and whatever. And because you're in America, you're rich, you know what I mean? I'm going to take this land, blah, 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 blah. So what they'll do is they'll put all of their land and their investments and their shares and their business, all of that stuff they put into the trust. And then that way, when inevitably they die, as we all do, their kids don't have to deal with the craziness. I can't tell you how many kids come over here for inheritance and like give up. And they're like, F it. They can have it, and I'm never coming back here. F my Kenyan family. Like it just creates a huge rift, and that's the end of it, right? So the parents who are like thinking ahead, they're like, listen, you are not going to be able to deal with the fallout of my death as far as family scrambling to take what's left for you, right? To take what's mine that's left for you, right? So in order to handle that, what they tend to do is they say, okay, fine. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to put everything in the trust. Hey, what's going on, Eddie? How's it going? We're going to take everything, put it in the trust. We're going to set up the trust deed and all of that. There is going to be generational wealth happening in that trust, but it's going to safeguard the land, right? So that's what Kenyans who are not living in Kenya do to make sure their kids get whatever, okay? The other type of generational wealth client are non-Kenyans who recognize the benefits of starting their generational wealth trusts under the Kenyan jurisdiction. And so they're creating their generational wealth trust over here because your distributions from the generational wealth trust are tax exempt up to 10 million in local currency per year per beneficiary, depending on the trust that you utilize. So we utilize a very specific set of trust law in order to get that benefit. All right. Somebody had popped up. I don't know if you guys remember. Somebody was like listening, and then they were like, "I'm gonna go do it myself," and they set up the wrong trust and paid twice as much to do it, and they didn't have the tax-free benefit, and they came in here riffing like we did it, only to find out that they tried to do it themselves and screwed it up. All right. We use a very specific set of trust laws. All right. So to make sure that you get that tax exempt status, it's per beneficiary. So if you got 5 kids, all 5 of them every year can get 10 million tax free, right? So that's helpful. So those are the 2 different types of trust clients that we typically have for inside of Kenya. Asset protection trust clients, we do their trust in different countries, right? So for those folks, can they use this? Yes. Do they use this? Yes, right? Because it maintains, especially when they're from the United States, or if they're Kenyans living in the U.S., or if they're U.S. folks that recognize the beauty of Kenya for generational wealth purposes, then the big thing with using this waterfall is it keeps the trust non-grantor. That's a U.S. thing. So if you're Canadian, UK, don't worry about this. But if you're American, if you have a grantor trust, it means that you have to report it every year to the IRS. All right, you have to report where all the bank accounts are, all of that stuff to the IRS. If you have a non-grantor trust, it means you don't have any reporting that you need to do to the IRS until a U.S. citizen gets a distribution, or unless you put a U.S. asset in the trust. Right? So how does this get around that? Well, when you set up the trust and you do the bond waterfall, where do the bonds come from? They come from Kenya, right? So the money going into the trust is coming from Kenya. It's not a U.S. asset. It is a Kenyan treasury bond. It is sovereign debt of Kenya. And the bond keeps paying into that trust for 10, 20 years, building generational wealth, compounding for your kids, right? So no one ever has to talk about that trust until your kids are grown up, or your grandkids, whichever you set it up for, start pulling money out of that trust. And then at the end of each tax year that they've pulled some money out, they would then, report on their taxes, I got X amount of dollars from this non-grantor trust, right? So that makes it a clean IRS situation. If you want to know more about that, contact your tax professional, or go to irs.gov. There's a little search bar up in the corner. In that search bar, type in non-grantor trust, and then type in grantor trust, and see what the difference is. See which one makes more sense to you. Right? Sometimes we do have clients that it actually does, it's very rare, but it actually does make sense for them to have a grantor trust and to do all that paperwork and tell the government where all their money is and show them all the bank. Sometimes that makes sense for very specific people with very specific tax situations. So still speak to your own CPA who knows your actual situation to give you the best advice on that. But that's what's available, and that's why people do it, right? So while the special may not be your thing, if you're focused on generational wealth and offshore generational wealth trusts, because you don't necessarily need the house and all of that, for those people, the waterfalling is important because it allows that trust to compound extraordinarily quickly over time, because you have passive income going into it, and the principal will go into it if you put it in the trust name, right? If it's your bond just being paid into the trust, then they get all of the passive income, but the principal would essentially kick back to you. Hi, Chi. I don't know if that's how you say it. Excuse me if it's not. The time I spent in China, I see QI and think Chi. It might not be Chi. So I apologize if it isn't. Yes. Okay. So you guys on YouTube do not need the payout schedule. Let me get rid of that. Awesome. Okay. So that's how that works. So end of year special for relocatees. The breakdown is it includes your immigration, right? So your immigration is covered. How do I onboard? There should be a link in the bio. All of these lives, no matter where you're looking at this live at, they're all business accounts. So they all allow for like an email or a link to be in the bio. So you should be able to just click that. All right. So, and if you don't need immigration, because some of the folks that onboard for this are Kenyan, right? So if you don't need immigration, there is a discount that'll come out of the price of it because you don't need immigration, right? So it includes immigration that leads to dual citizenship. Unless you have some real specific purpose why you don't want that, then we can go do an investor permit, but that will change how much money you have to come out of pocket. Technically, for an investor permit, the government requires you to show $100,000 in a local bank account. You can take it back after you get the investor permit, so you don't actually have to spend it, but it does have to be there. We can set it up where you kill two birds with one stone. So we can set it up where you pay the 185 for the whole package, and then we get the investor permit with one, and then pull that back out and build your house, and go from there. It'll slow things down, of course. But typically, people want dual citizenship. And so, because they want dual citizenship, we do a Class K ordinary residency permit. It is not a retirement permit. Anyone who calls it a retirement visa absolutely doesn't know what they're talking about. It's not a visa at all. It is a permit, right? Kenya doesn't even have visas anymore. They have electronic travel authorizations now that they use in the place of visas. So it has nothing to do with retirement. It has nothing to do with the visa. Retirees typically do qualify for it the easiest. So that's why people mention retirement sometimes. But the age requirement on a Class K permit is 35 years old, right? So if you're younger than 35 years old, then we have to use either a digital nomad permit, which is the least useful permit, or a investor permit, right? Which you would qualify for if you can afford this package. You can afford an investor permit. So The qualification is actually out the window because of the special price, right? So you get the permit, you get your immigration. Our law firm handles that. Our law firm is in Mombasa, so our legal team handles all of that for you. Our legal team handles all of your legal compliance for you. Okay, your permit does not include dependent passes. So if you have dependents, whether it's a spousal dependent, whether it's children, or we can apply for a special dependent for parents if your parents are elderly and need support, right? So if you can get a doctor's letter that says that you need to support your parents, then that would save you the price of a full-on permit for parents. You'd be able to get a dependent pass for parents, okay? So that's something to talk about with our legal team as well. All right, so immigration covered, legal compliance covered, all right, tax compliance covered, right? Then you get a piece of land in Diani Beach, right? One of the number one African tourist resorts, like for the last 5 years in a row. It's been the number one beach in Africa, not Kenya, right? In Africa, right? So in the Diani Beach area, you will get a standard 50 by 100 plot. On that plot, we will build you a house, right? So you get the house, you get the land, all of it goes into your name. You will also get the bond ladder, right? The bond ladder is the only thing that's not instantaneous because we have to buy 6 bonds in order to ladder you, right? This special is only good until February for that reason, because we need enough time so that we can actually deliver on the 6 bonds, right? So if we allow people to onboard in July, the 7th month of the year, and we need 6 bonds to make this thing happen for you, then we might not be able to actually deliver. And we never set ourselves up for failure the same way we never set you up for failure. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to do it, and that's why the special closes in February. Sometimes we get lucky. Let me give you an example of that. All right. I will also put the green screen on for YouTube so you can follow along. These are the bonds that are available currently, right now. Okay, so there on the right side of your screen, there's the FXD1 2022 25-year bond. This is a opening, right? So this bond has 21.8 years left maturity. And then you can see there on the left side of your screen, there's the FXD1 2029 20-year bond, also a reopening. There's 13 years left to maturity. Now, remember, we target for 10 years. So both of these bonds qualify, right? Now, if you look at the payouts, let me switch to the payouts. I'll switch on both screens. If you look at the payouts, right, you'll see that for the short one, the 13-year bond, the payouts happen in April and September, or was that October? I'm sorry, April and October, right? Now, if you look at the bond below, oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, all right. So wait. April and October for the short one, and then if you look at the bond below, you will see that that bond ends paying out in, let's see here, it starts in April and October, right? And then it shifts. Do you see the shift? See where it goes to September and March 31st, 2024, September 29th, 2042, sorry. You see where that shift happens? So these two bonds, even though they're being presented in the same month, have different month payouts, right? So sometimes we can get lucky and we can get both bonds in the same month and the payouts won't be at the same time, especially when they're reopens like this, because these are a reopening of older bonds, right? So because they're a reopening, their payout date is based on the first time they opened. So we can actually get a quarter's worth of bond payments in the same month instead of just getting 2 months worth out of the year, right? See how that works? This doesn't always happen. All right, this only happens when there are reopenings, and sometimes the reopenings are not from the same month. The two different bonds being offered are not from the same month. So sometimes it'll only take us 3 months to get all 6 months worth of bonds, which have 12 payouts because every bond has 2 payouts every 6 months. So as long as you have the 6 bonds and they're layered properly, you will get a check every month of the year. That's the point, right? That's what laddering means. Okay. Let me turn off this green screen for you guys over here on YouTube. It's more complicated, so it takes me longer than just pressing a button. All right, right. So, but you can't bank on that you're going to get the perfect mixture of bonds like we got this month to make that happen. So you got to give yourself the time and the space to be able to collect all 6 bonds. So that's why the special only lasts until American Black History Month, February. All right, so February, that's it for the special. And then after that, then we just got to set it up for you, at whatever price it costs at that point. Just came back from Nairobi. I need something in Kenya slower, but I'm a single man wanting a wife, so not too slow. All right, yeah. Need something in Kenya. All right, so yeah, this particular special, the land and the house are Indiana Beach. If you don't want to live by the beach, if you're not a beach person, you don't want to live at the beach, then we got to modify things so the special price is not going to apply to you. We build anywhere in Kenya, but the prices are different depending on where you want to live. Bro, can I ask why this info is important? I just joined. Is this something we can invest in? Yes, you can waterfall bonds if you want. We do have quite a few people who plan out their relocation big time, right? So we have people who are working with us on 7-year plans of immigration, right? Because they're going to retire from their job in 7 years and they want to be completely set up. So they actually have these waterfalls. Some of them actually get a new waterfall each year, right? So some of them have a ton of money coming in. These incredible bond rates have been with us since 2023, right? They're not going to last forever. It's not possible, right? So we're on an uptick of bond rates. The bond rates are incredible. And there are a couple African countries that have better bond rates, but their currency doesn't spend the same, right? So the cost of living isn't the same. So even though they might be getting 27% on their currency, blah, 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 it's not spending the way it's spending in Kenya, right? So for our relocatees, it's huge for them. And then those are the folks that have those big long plans. They have Kenyan bank accounts. They have Kenyan permits. That's part of their plan, right? So they have a permit. They could be here if they wanted to, but they're abroad working because they're working towards, their pension or their whatever. They've been working somewhere for 20 years. They're trying to finish that 20 years or 40 years. There's a couple PA state troopers that'll be moving here after they retire, so they got to put their 40 years in. Military guys, putting years in the military. And all of that stuff. A couple postal workers who are ex-military, so they get their military time in the post office, and then they finish their post office time. So there's all these people who are looking at these kind of like pension-style situations that they're working towards. But at the same time, they're building a record for dual citizenship on this side, right? And so while they're doing that, they're building up a pot of money that's compounding while they're away, so that when they come here, they're automatically multimillionaires. They got it all going on, and they have a really, really good life, plus this U.S. pension coming in, or multiple pensions in some of their situations. Most of the state trooper guys are also ex-military, so they have a military pension coming in, they have a state pension coming in, and then they only do 20 years. So a lot of them did their 20 years military and state at the same time, and then they do 20 more years in like a city police department. Right. So then they get a city pension coming in at the end of the 40 years. So some people just make really good choices, right? As far as, what kind of jobs they go into and what the benefits of those jobs are. And they just plan really well. So, yeah, a lot of people do invest into it because they know these incredible interest rates are not going to last. Right. What makes the interest rates incredible? They're all higher than the S&P 500. every single one of them, right? So you can Google, right? What's the ROI on the S&P 500, and it's going to come back somewhere around 10%, 10 and a half, somewhere in there. And the lowest bond that we got last year was what, 12%? I just put it up. How much was it? You guys remember? Let's take a look. See what it was. Lowest bond for last year's clients was 12%. Right? That was the lowest. So the lowest bond that we put our clients into last year was 2% higher than the S&P 500 as a sovereign debt bond, as a government treasury bond. Right? So that's incredible. Not going to last. It's incredible, but it's not going to last. Right? So eventually it'll go down. It's not the you. Okay, let me read the question because I got the two other live stream views here. Your views on the UN going to Kenya about to be a whole lot of gentrification out there. There's not, right? So here's the issue. Sometimes we take our own local issues and we project them on other people, not knowing how the issues work, number one, and not knowing how those other people work, number two, right? Here's why gentrification isn't even possible in Kenya. In the United States, people gentrify neighborhoods. The way they gentrify neighborhoods is they go into the neighborhood and they increase the tax value. Once the tax value is increased, the people who've been living in that neighborhood all their lives can no longer afford their own houses. They can't pay the taxes on the houses and they're gentrified out of the neighborhood. That's because we use comps in America to figure out the price of real estate. So if the house next door sold for 100,000, your house is now worth 100,000. If your house is worth 100,000, you have to pay taxes on the 100,000 even though you haven't sold your house, right? So property tax is like the only unrealized gain that we pay in the United States. Following? Okay. In Kenya, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as comps. So if I build a $100 billion mansion right next to a cow dung house, and there are these little shacks made out of cow dung, the tax on the cow dung house does not change at all. Neither does the tax on my $1 billion mansion because they're land rates. So it's the valuation of my land only, period. Doesn't affect the neighborhood. So how can I gentrify? Right? So when people take what they know to be true locally and project that internationally as though the way they live in their local community is the only way to live, they end up being wrong from the jump. Right? So nobody moving here can create gentrification. It does not work. All right. Now, inflation, yes. You can overpay people, you can overpay for services, and then those people providing those services can decide, you know what, screw it. Everybody should pay this new price. That's a whole different animal, right? But gentrification is not possible, right? Hyperinflation is possible, which is why in the beginning of this live, we talked about get your local currency out of your head, right? Learn the local currency where you move. Right? Don't be in your head talk about, oh, that's only $2, that's only $5. That's not the way you move to any country, right? I made that mistake when I moved to China. This is not an African thing, right? This is about relocating, period. From one currency to another, you have to get in the mindset of the local currency, or else you're gonna cause problems, right? But don't project your own issues from your own country and act like it's a worldwide epidemic and everything is the same. It's not. All right. So the UN thing cannot cause gentrification. Nothing can cause gentrification in Kenya. It's not possible. All right. Kenya. Black America moving. Kenya. I am a Kenyan, and Kenya has really been in the center of Black America moving to Kenya, which is a plus. Yeah, definitely. Typically, they have a non-colonial mindset as much as possible. Sometimes there's colonial things that are just burnt into people, and it does take a really, really long time to get those things out because they're things that have never been questioned, right? So there's things that are programmed from kindergarten and very, early childhood. So there's little things. But the biggest difference, and I actually heard a tourist say this, right? So there's a tourist from Europe who was living here. and he was like, "Oh, these people are not like us," right? Like I heard him say it physically, right? And so the biggest difference is you'll see people do things, and you're like, "Well, why did you do that? Would you want somebody to do that to your mama? Would you want somebody to do that to your sister? Why did you do that?" Right? And it's because they don't see that. Right? When I see a local woman or a local man walking the streets, I think to myself, that dude looked like my cousin. That woman looks like my mother, right? So I see them as an equivalency to me and as a human being, as a person, right? That's just off the rip. So I get what you're saying as a Kenyan, seeing now Black Americans showing up, and we're acting differently than some of the other foreigners who have shown up, because we see other Black people as us. We see them as that looks just like my baby sister, that looks just like my mother. I'm not going to do something to them that I wouldn't do to my sister, or my mother, my brother, my cousin, right? Which other folks don't always think of you that way, because when they look at you, they don't see that. So yeah, it's been definitely very different. I hear that all the time. So thank you actually for saying it on the live as a Kenyan, but I hear that from local people all the time. How do you get in the mindset of local currency? It actually happens automatically. You just want to make it happen faster, but it actually happens automatically. And what it comes from is like knowing price sets, right? So like if somebody were to ask you right now, what does a hamburger cost? You know the answer, right? And you know that there's also a range, right? Like in your head, like, oh, well, if you go to McDonald's, you're going to get a Big Mac for $5.99. But if you go to Five Guys, it's going to be $10.99 minimum. And if you go to Red Robin, now you're talking about paying $20 for, like, these things in your head. You don't have to be there to answer the question. You don't have to be in the restaurant, because you're part of the local ecosystem. You know what that costs, right? And so that's where you got to get to. You got to get to the point where somebody says, all right, what is it? What's a taxi from Main Street to 3rd Street? And like, oh, that's $25 from Main Street to 3rd Street. That's what it costs. So that's how you get in that mindset. What you don't want to do is get pretentious, right? You don't want to be like, ooh, my dollar is worth so much money here, and I'm just going to start making it rain. There's a lot of that happens for people who've never really had money before, and now all of a sudden they're essentially rich, right? And so now everything is judged off of the dollar. That's how you go broke, right? So you definitely want to stay away from that mindset. But as you're here and as you engage, you'll just start learning like what the prices are, and then you'll be able to move forward from there. So it'll happen regardless, but the faster you make it happen, the better off you are. How can someone come to the USA legally? Well, that's not really in our wheelhouse per se. We do actually do a little bit of that from the Kenyan side, going the other way. It's a little bit different now, though. So you got two options: own a business for real. Has to be a real business. You got to own it for 1 year. Then you can use something called an L1A transfer visa, right? And that's probably the best way to do it. Second best way is get married. How do you start investing with me? Well, we're not really an investment firm per se. We do generational wealth stuff. You can just take that as an investment and go along with it as you wish. But that would require a consultation. So just book an initial consultation with us, and we'll let you know all the things that you can invest in with us. One of the bonds, which is obviously just a straight up investment, we offer those bonds so that people can move here and not have to work anymore. That the bonds pay them enough money every month that they can live off of the bond income. But obviously you don't have to spend that money. You can compound that money. Our generational wealth clients do that, where they don't spend the money, they reinvest the money, and they grow it. And so, if you just want something added to your portfolio at really great interest rates, you can do that. Now, for the folks that are over here that are doing, relocation, it's perfect, right? For folks that are trying to be like, okay, cool, amazing investment rates, let me get that, but I'm going to stay in the United States, and I want to spend the ROI in the United States. Now, your only other kind of random factor is going to be exchange rate. The exchange rate can change at any time, which would affect in the exchange part of it. It doesn't affect the percentage of ROI that you're getting locally. But when you try to bring it back into US dollars, it could affect the US dollars you physically get in your hand based on the exchange markets going up and down, right? So if that's your plan, then you want to think that through as well. But for stuff like the 18.46% infrastructure bond that's tax exempt on this side, no matter what the interest rates does, no matter not the interest rates, the exchange rates do, you're at least making 15%. You know what I mean? So in that situation, a lot of folks actually took U.S. loans because they could get the loan at 7% and bought the 18% bond and used the interest from the bond that they're getting paid out to pay the loan, the interest on the loan. So when it's almost 20% ROI, those things typically don't matter anymore. The UN can't change a thing because there's exactly. That's what, yeah. So the problem is for people who don't travel, right? Which I think the person who brought that up, a lot of people are like internet activists, right? They've never traveled. They don't do real activism. They don't know the definitions of the words they use, and so in their head they're like, "Oh, the UN is going there, gentrification." It's not possible. The way that this market works, it doesn't work that way, and that's just this market. That doesn't mean it's not possible to gentrify in Africa. It absolutely is. But the way that we do real estate in Kenya and the way that we do taxes in Kenya, you cannot gentrify people. No matter what you build, it does not affect the taxes of the person next to you. Pato says he can sell a ranch in the Rift Valley. We don't ever do anything like that because our lawyers do a deep dive in due diligence, right? So even we have clients that don't get land from us, but then eventually they want some land. Even those clients come back and have our lawyers do the due diligence, because if your due diligence is not on point, you risk losing that land. And we've had a lot of do-it-yourself folks that they did their immigration through us and then walked away. I got it from here. And then they come back 9 months later, I bought a house, da 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 da, and then a bulldozer came with a court order and knocked my house down, said that my house was built on land I didn't own. Can you help me? Not really, probably not, because the Supreme Court has ruled that due diligence is your responsibility. So if you listen to the guy at the bar and paid him $100,000 for land that he didn't even own, and then you find out it was a scam, that is your fault by law. Right? You're supposed to do your due diligence. So stop playing. So yeah, people will pop up everywhere. I got this, I got that. I got an acre here, I got an acre there. Make sure that the due diligence is on point. As a U.S. barred real estate, well, what state? What state are you barred in? That might actually matter, and I'll tell you why. But anyway, as a U.S. barred real estate attorney, can I practice in Kenya or assist others with due diligence? You can probably assist with due diligence, but it'll be busy work for a while, right? It's just like, all right, and this is what people don't understand about law school sometimes. You definitely do, if you're an attorney. But law school teaches you how to read and research the law. There are mock trials and they go over the legal theories and things like that. But until you get your first job at a firm, like somebody gets out of law school. Oh, hold on. I'm being challenged on TikTok. Only on TikTok. Only on TikTok do I have to solve a puzzle to keep the live open. All right, so let me go back in case I think they pause that when they give me that challenge. So when you come out of law school, typically an American lawyer can't even file a patent, right? Like they have no idea how to do it. So when you get your first job in a law firm, that's where you learn everything. So you're filing the motions, you work for a junior partner typically, and that junior partner is taking you, through and giving you the on-the-job training. So it's almost like you're a doctor and you're done with med school and now you go for your 4 years of medical residency. Your first job as a lawyer is essentially the same thing, right? So you know how to do legal research and all that, but you don't actually know how things work right away. It's the same way here, right? So even though you might have experience or whatever, you got to figure out how like the lands ministry works and like how it works in your county, because it might work differently in Nairobi than it works in Mombasa and all of that stuff, right? So coming with a legal background is helpful because you might be able to like read legalese to a certain extent, but you would still have to go through that process of like, this is how we do the filings here. This is the format. The format of legal filings is different here. I've been told by some UK people that it's the same as the UK, but it's not the same as the United States, right? So getting that going, but the learning curve should be really, really, really tight for somebody who is, like already a lawyer. Can you convert your license? No. Typically, American lawyers have a degree called a JD, a Juris Doctorate. So technically, most U.S. Lawyers are technically doctors. They just don't use the term because it's pretentious. But they have a Juris Doctorate, right? And so everywhere else in the world uses a Master of Laws, right? So most lawyers elsewhere in the world, and a lot of them, they don't even need the master. A Bachelor of Laws is enough. So it's a BLL, right, or an MLL, or a DLL, right? So they could be doctorates, and those people do use doctors because they like got a PhD, right, in law. But the two aren't compatible, right? So like a Kenyan lawyer who's thinking that they might want to do law in the United States would get into a law program that has like a JD and a BLL. And American lawyers who are thinking that they might want to do international law would do the same thing. Oxford used to be known for having a double law degree. And so you would go to Oxford Law, you would get a JD, and I think it was an MLL. So you would get a Master of Laws, which is the international recognized degree, and you would get your American Juris Doctorate. So there's that. This migration is reshaping this country's development, especially on real estate consumption. Yeah, definitely. But somewhat and not so much, because with the migration, the real estate consumption is happening in major cities and tourist areas, right? There's not too many folks that are like, I want to be out in the bush in Kericho, right? So most of the relocatees, they want to be close to the private hospitals. They want to be close to like grocery stores and stuff like that. Whereas like local people are like, no, I'll grow my own food. I don't need to be close to a grocery store. I'm gonna have a couple cows, a couple goats, like, you know what I mean? Now, mind you, we've built in Meru, we've built in Embu, we've built in Kakamega, we've built in Kisumu, we've built in Eldoret, we've built in Narak, we've built in Nukuru, we've built in Kisi Town. So there are things, right? But for the most part, the relocatees are not trying to live out in the middle of the bush somewhere. You know what I mean? They want to live somewhere where if something happens, they break their arm, it's a 15-minute drive to a hospital that looks just like the hospitals that they're comfortable with. You know what I mean? So it's not like affecting the country as a whole. It might affect Nairobi, which is designed for that, obviously. Might affect Mombasa a little bit, but the country as a whole, not so much. So you're looking at Malindi, which is tourist area, Kilifi, tourist area, Watamu, tourist area, Nyali, tourist area, Diani, where I live, tourist area, right? So you're looking at those places being pretty well affected. And then you're looking at Mombasa, the second largest city in the country, and Nairobi, the largest city in the country, being pretty well affected. And then for the UK, almost every single one of our UK clients picked Nakuru, and I think it's because there's the permanent British military base there. So there's a lot of British like stuff there, right? Like they create businesses that like serve, British tastes and stuff like that. So you can go there, you can get like Yorkshire pudding, you know what I mean? Because there's so much British stuff going on there. That's another reason why the Italians find themselves in Malindi, because Kalifi. right? So because there's so many Italians there that you can go there and you can, you can find gelato and you can find, those things there. So that's primarily what's going on there. Yeah, definitely, definitely with the now for your people who are what do they call themselves? Oh my goodness, what do they call themselves? Not off gridders, but that's what they are. The people who want to live off grid. Those folks are typically okay with going out into the bush and like, building a solar setup or whatever and like farming and like never go to the cities and whatever. But within a generation they're Kenyan. That's the other solid thing with a lot of our clients, is like within a generation they're Kenyan. Like my son's already Kenyan. My wife is Meru. We had a child here. He has multiple citizenships, because we have portfolios. But his first one is his Kenyan, passport, and his birth certificate is a Kenyan birth certificate, right? So he's still a U.S. citizen and all of that, and all the other citizenships that he's been able to inherit from me. But in one generation, we're Kenyan, right? So from him on, we're already Kenyan. So that's another difference between like African Americans that move over here and like Afro Canadians and Afro Brits and all of that stuff versus like some folks who we've met people who are like three generations in and not a single one has a Kenyan passport, right? Which is why the leasehold thing makes a lot of sense. Because if you're living like that, like how could you possibly be three generations in and you're all still German? Like not a single one of you is Kenyan, right? So at that point, after 99 years, they lose their land because you never became Kenyan. Like what is going on, right? So in that sense, the whole leasehold thing actually makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. What does it all include again? Sorry, I came late. Yeah, no, that's fine. Immigration is included, all legalities and all like tax compliances, so like KRA pins and all of that stuff included. Sometimes, depending on what's going on with you, there's a company in the middle there. So sometimes there's a company included. There's definitely a trust fund included. We will set up an international trust fund for you. We'll build you a house about 1,600 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 3.5 bathroom, two-story house. It'll be on a 50 by 100 plot in Deanny Beach, so you'll get some land very close to the beach, where that house will be located. There are, of course, other relocatees that live in that same area, so you'll get that. And the most important thing is the bond ladder. The bond ladder will be able to pay you a monthly passive income that should put you in a position where you don't have to work again for about the next 10 years. So that's the biggest bang for the buck. Right. Yeah, well, yeah, no, that package is 185. Sorry, it's 185,000, which is really, really, really impressive. Um, the house itself, we just signed some deals. If you go back and look at our social media, we just signed some deals with our Chinese suppliers and all that. So if you go back and you look, the house by itself used to cost 175,000 to build, right? So had we not went to China 2 months ago and stayed there for over a month and signed all kinds of new um, deals with our product suppliers, we wouldn't even be able to do this. Can you explain the bond ladder? I came late. Sure. Let me show it to you instead, and then we'll walk through it together while I show it to you. How's that? All right. So this is what we did for last year's clients. This is actually a page from the report that our clients get at the end of the year. So this is the 6 bonds. Each tranche is a bond. So these are the 6 bonds that we did last year. Okay. The first bond was SDB1. Is a 30-year bond. It's a reopening. That was the lowest ROI that we got. So that was the lowest. ROI stands for return on investment. So that was the lowest ROI that we had. It was 12%. You get 12% ROI. To put that in perspective, if you had put the same money in the S&P 500, historically over time, you would have ended up with about a 10.5% ROI. Okay, that's been the historical growth of the S&P 500 for the last 40 years or whatever, right? So the lowest bond was tranche A. It's 12% that they got ROI on that, right? The next bond was a big boy. It's an infrastructure bond, which means it's tax free. That bond was 18.4607% tax free. Next bond was 16%. Next bond was 13.942%. Next bond was 13.4%. Next bond was 13.215%. Okay, so that's great. Now we got the percentages. What did that mean as far as money in their account? You see on this side, it says 1M under each tranche, right? So that's how much local currency, it's not $1 million, it's 1 million shillings, right? That's how much local currency we plugged into each one, all right? So consider, just because of, processing fees and all of that stuff, just consider a million to be 10,000. It's less than that, but let's do easy math, okay? So each million local currency is 10,000 US dollars, okay? Now, we switch over. These are the payouts. This is historical. This is what actually got paid to our clients that have been with us since last year, right? So in January, that low 12% bond, that was the lowest one. It paid out 60,000 local currency. There was a 10% withholding tax from the government. They got 54,000 in their bank account. Remember, the next month was the big boy tax free, 18.46%, blah, 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 blah. So those folks on that million shillings, they got 92,303.50. Now, let me stop you right there. When you go back, you're like, wait a minute, 12% was 120,000. Why did they get 60? Because the bond pays out twice a year, every 6 months. That's why we buy 6 of them. It's all strategy, right? We buy 6 of them, we get 12 payments, right? All right. So for you fast mathers that were just like, wait a minute, that's only half the money. Did you take half the money? No, we did not take half the money. All the money goes to you, right? In March, 80,000 came out. 8,000 was the 10% withholding tax. They got 72,000, right? In April, 69,710 came out. They paid the withholding tax. They paid 6,971 in tax. They got 62,739 in their bank account. In May, 76,000 came out as the gross payout. They paid their taxes, which comes before the money even touches you. You don't have to do a tax return at the end of the year. That was 6,700 that came out in the taxes. They got in their bank account 60,300. Right. Then the next infrastructure bond, which infrastructure bonds are tax exempt. Next infrastructure bond hit 66,075. They got all 66,075 because it's tax exempt. That's half the year. Then it started over. So all of those numbers when it started over are exactly the same as the first half of the year, right? The target that we utilize for, your standard, relocate is 50,000 a month. If you need more than 50,000 a month, all we got to do is adjust how much bonding, we purchase, which obviously adjusts the price of the waterfall in general. So super easy, super simple, because they're bonds. Bonds are the government using the people as a bank, right? So bonds is the government needs money for infrastructure projects or whatever. It opens a bond. It borrows money from the people and guarantees them an interest rate paid back on their money, right? So that's what a bond is. It's designed to be simple because it is not a broker tool. It is not a Wall Street tool. It is a tool that governments and companies, you can do a corporate bond, but these are all government bonds that governments use to borrow money from their people. So they make it simple for those people that they want to borrow the money from to understand the bond. Right. So the simplest bond is considered the safest investment. All right. Still an investment. There's still risk. The risk is that the government can have a sovereign default. Right. Sovereign defaults are crazy. Right. Like that. Like maybe Ukraine is having a sovereign default right now because it's going through a war. Like that's the type of stuff that creates sovereign defaults. Right. So all investments carry risk, but this is the safest of all investments. According to most of your investment professionals, you're not going to find anything that's safer than a sovereign treasury bond, right? Corporate bond is different. There are classifications on corporate bond, AAA bond, B bond, triple B bond, double B bond, all of that. That's a different thing. But government debt is about as safe as it gets. Can we live near Nairobi? Spelling. And is the two-bedroom house the starting point? Can we scale up? Yes, everything is a starting point. Yes, you can scale up on everything. Yes, you can live near Nairobi. It changes the price, right? So the special is kind of an all-in-one. You don't have to think about it package, right? So with the special, you're living by the beach because that's the land that we priced and the building that we priced is the two-bedroom and the blah, 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 right? We've already had people who have onboarded and they're like, look, my family's big. I need a 5-bedroom house. Still want to live by the beach though, because that's cool. And we just adjust the price for them. So yeah, everything is starting point. There are some people who are like, yo, there are so many people in my household. I don't think the 50,000 is gonna cut it. And so we sit down and we figure out what their actual expenses might be. And then it's like, all right, we need to do double the bonds, right? So that you get 100,000 minimum per month and go from there. So everything is a starting place, but that the price isn't going to hold if you upgrade things. Oh, okay. I thought there was a place called Spelling. I'm like, is there a place outside of Nairobi called Spelling? There's a place out there called Landless. So first time somebody was like, "Can I live in Landless?" I was like, "You want to live without land? What do you?" But there is a place called Landless. I think it's close to Tika. Oh, that's a great question. Yes, you can. The answer is yes. Good question from the YouTube side. You can use your VA medical here. We don't specialize in that, but there's one other American-owned relocation firm that operates here that's legit. There's a whole bunch of we do relocation people, but they're most of them are not actually legit. But the other one that's legit is called Traverse Culture. She specializes in medical tourism, right? So her company specializes in medical tourism. We specialize in generational wealth. So that type of stuff we do refer out to her, just because she even has like contracts with the hospital, so she gets special prices on procedures and all of that. But yes, you can use your VA medical here, absolutely, and she can walk you through the forms and whatever is necessary to get that going. So if that's something you need, you let me know. We'll definitely put you in touch with her. Is it just for foreigners or? Oh, no. Kenyan diaspora. Yeah, for sure. We have an entire kind of sector of Kenyan diaspora clients because what ends up happening with them is the land they leave to their kids typically goes into contest. There's typically some cousin, aunt, whoever that is like, oh no, this is my land. You guys are in America. You don't need this land. You guys are rich. I'm taking the land. Blah 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 blah. So one of the biggest things that we do for for Kenyans in the diaspora is we set up trust protections for them, where all of their land goes into a trust and their kids are the beneficiary of the trust. So there is no probate court. Their kids get everything. There are no family members threatening the kids or any other such nonsense, which unfortunately happens here. And they know their kids ain't gonna be able to navigate it. They know their kids growing up in the US, the UK, the Canada, whatever, they're not gonna be able to navigate the intricacies of how people are gonna try to play them for their inheritance. So they come to us, we set up the inheritance for them in the trust fund. They still buy stuff like these bonds, but they put them in the trust fund so that at the end of their life, the trust fund has multi-millions of dollars in it just off of compounding. And then their kids have a very smooth transition. No one can claim anything. Any of the sick family members that have never even spoken to their kids the entire life and then try to steal from them, their lawyers tell them, this person was on their P's and Q's, like you can't touch any of this. It's not even owned by the person you say is your family, it's owned by the trust. And so that's the end of that. So they protect their kids that way. The other thing that happens is, like we have a couple Kenyan, they actually came to us as a block. So we have like 13 Kenyan clients in the diaspora whose kids were in schools where there were school shootings. And they pulled their kids out and sent their kids to boarding school in Kenya, where that never happens, right? And so that trust fund takes care of paying the school fees and takes care of the food that the kids need to eat and all of that, and that's another way that they do that. It also makes sure that their kids get on the plane to come back for holidays, Christmas. Like right now, all of those kids are home, and whether it be America, the UK, Canada, all those kids are at home with their Kenyan parents, but they're going to come back and go to school here again at like international boarding schools here, where they don't have to worry about getting a phone call that their kid has been unlived by some crazy, shooter. So that happens all the time. So are the bonds connected to the trust? Yes. Typically, when you do it that way, the trust owns the bonds. Why? Do you have to have the trust own the bonds? No. But if you own the bonds and you get into a car accident, guess what the judge can make you do? Give the other person your bonds. You're the weak link if you own anything, right? Even if you have a company that's a limited liability company, who owns the shares of that company? You do. So you're the weak link. If something happens at the company, yeah, they can't get to you because limited liability. But if something happens to you, the judge can make you give up your shares to pay back whoever sued you, right? So you're the weak link. So typically what ends up happening is if you're trying to come here and live off the bonds and never have to work again, why would you put yourself in a position that if you get into a car accident, someone steals your passive income and now you're screwed, right? So if the trust owns it, then no one can ever take it, right? And you maintain control of that passive income because no one can take it from you by suing you. The trust is set up under Kenyan law. So if anything happens to you in the United States, and this happens quite often, we'll have a lot of clients that will consult with their bankruptcy attorney before leaving, and they will leave and they will fund everything and they will get their brand new house and brand new car and a brand new all the stuff out here, and they'll get their trust fund and they'll get their bonds and all of that stuff, right? All of that stuff will be set up. And then when it doesn't work out on the US side, they'll file a bankruptcy, right? And they'll be protected. And even if the United States says, well, listen, the trust isn't seasoned, right? There's normally a 2-year seasoning on a trust. Well, that trust isn't seasoned. That trust was designed to defraud creditors or whatever. Because it's an international trust, the local courts will just flip the finger to the U.S. courts, and that'll be the end of that. And if you live here, it's a completely different thing. Now, you got to comply with court orders, right? You got to speak to your local attorneys and all of that stuff. But what we've seen is that if the trust is designed the proper way, you do comply with all court orders and you still can't get anything out of the trust, right? The trust is designed that the corporate trustees, who are lawyers, deny any distributions from the trust, and there are no mandatory distributions in the trust, and there are no distribution rights from the grantor of the trust. And typically the grantor may not even be the beneficiary, and the beneficiary doesn't even have distribution rights, right? So the trustee makes the distributions based on the trust deed, not based on requests for distribution, right? And the trustee typically swears in anybody making a distribution from the trust and asks them if that distribution is the result of a court order. And then there's legal language on this side that forces them to say no to anything that is the result of a court order. So, that's the case. Are you still suggesting a minimum purchase of 1 million shillings worth of? Yes, that's our standard floor. The reason why that corporate trustee, it's a corporation. Yep. But you create the trust deed, right? And in the Kenyan trust system, I'm gonna come back and answer that, Eddie. In the Kenyan trust system, there's a position called protector, and there's a position called what's the other one called? The other title will come to me. But a protector can be anyone, right? So typically what ends up happening is folks who have a legal team or they have a CPA or whatever in the US, that person can step in and be there's a protector and an enforcer, right? So that person can step in and be either protector or enforcer, but the protector and the enforcer, they both can have the ability, if it's in the trust deed, to step in and remove a trustee, right? So if a trustee is acting up, which our trustee's always been solid, obviously, or we wouldn't recommend them, but if a trustee start acting up, the enforcer and the protector can step in and just remove the trustee. Typically, what happens with the enforcer is they enforce the person who created the trust, what we call a grantor on this side. The person who created the trust wishes, because that person might not, which probably isn't the trustee, and may not be the beneficiary if it's a generational wealth trust. The kids might be the beneficiary, right? So the enforcer makes sure that their wishes are enforced in case the trustee is misinterpreted. The protector typically steps in when the grantor dies and make sure that they almost like represent the beneficiaries and make sure that everything is just copacetic, right? So those people don't need to be attorneys. They don't need to be professionals. We like it when the enforcer is a professional, but there's a bunch of different things built into Kenyan trust that may not be available in your local trust that give extra protection. All right, so the minimum thing about the 1 million shillings worth of bonds, can you buy less than that? Yes, but the issue with that is that a lot of the bonds are amortized, right? So what does that mean? That means that let's say you put in, I don't know, 100,000 shillings instead of a million, right? At the first amortization of the bond, which is going to be before the maturity, they're just going to give you your 100,000 back. You got your ROI, you got whatever percentage they promised you, but you're not going to participate in all 20 years of the bond, right? So what ends up happening is at the first amortization, if you have a million or more shillings in the bond, they only give you a piece of it back, right? So let's say it's a 20-year bond. Maybe at 10 years, they'll give you 500,000 back. You still have a 500,000 in the bond, right? And you're still getting the same interest, right? Then at 15 years, maybe they give you 300,000. Now you only have 200,000 left in the bond. That's why, even though they're 20-year bonds, notice we haven't said you cannot work for 20 years. We said you'll get about 10 years out of that because of the amortization, right? All of this stuff we go over, with our clients, and get into the nitty gritty once they come on board. But that's why, our targets are lower than the actual amounts that people get. Our target is 50,000 a month. As you can see by what everybody got last year, only one payment, which is 2 months out of the year, did they even get close to 50,000, which was 54,000. Most of the other months they were above 60. So your budgeting, you're going to get a delightful surprise that your budgeting is always lower than the money you got coming in, which is our definition of rich. As long as your passive income, not your earned income, as long as your passive income is greater than your burn rate, you're rich. Wealth takes something else, right? You're not wealthy. You're just rich because you have more money that you don't have to work for coming in than the money you spend every month. That is rich, okay? So that's what the million is for. Sure, if you just want to dip your toe in and start investing and you can't afford to do any amount you want, you're still getting great rates of return, and that's fine. Go ahead and go do that. But the amortization is going to kick you out of the bond, at some point earlier than the maturity of the actual bond. All right. We can't help you with the wife thing. Actually, we probably can, but it's not one of our. We have some events where those events are on a yacht. We'll have little yacht parties for annual events, trustee meetings and stuff like that. Where we'll have an end of year thing. So this document that you see, let me bring it back up here. This document, as you can see, there's some other information below here, detailed security profiles, income analysis, da 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 da. There's a report that comes out to all of our generational wealth people as to how the generational wealth is going. You know what I mean? And so this report covers that. And sometimes those things happen on yacht parties and stuff like that. Is there an ongoing fee? It depends. It depends on what we're doing the trust for. So asset protection trust, absolutely. There's absolutely an ongoing fee for asset protection trust, but that's a different thing that we have not talked about in this live at all. Those are rich people already. In order for you to need an asset protection trust, you need like at least 10 million in assets. Well, at least a million in assets, right? And so we have different countries even that we do those asset protection trusts in because of their case law. So that's a whole different thing, right? For the generational wealth trust, yes, there is a fee, but the fee is ridiculously small. Because the generational wealth trust starts ridiculously small, it ends up being a situation where the trustee grows with you, right? And so, like, we have people who will start a generational wealth trust and they're not doing this bond waterfalling. Like, this bond waterfalling is creme de la creme, right? If you do that, you're solid, right? But there are folks who will come in and they'll be like, look, I'm going to put $1,000 in an offshore generational wealth trust. It's for my grandkids, okay? And the trustee is going to compound that $1,000, right? So now the fee might be like 6% of the gains, right? Of the gains, not of the $1,000, right? So what happens if we get 10%, which, like I said, that's like S&P 500. That's great gains, right? So if you get 10% on $1,000, what is that? That's $100, right? And then if it's 6% of the $100, what is that? $6, right? So the trustee made $6 in the first year, right? Nothing, right? You can't even pay your overhead with that, right? So the trustee ends up being in it for the long haul with the generational wealth people because they're not making nothing until 30 years of compounding, right? Because it's going to get to a point where it compounds and the compounding is $100,000. Well, now the trustee's making big bucks, but now that's just a corporation because the original trustee might be dead. Like the actual person who was handling it, he might be gone. It's 30 years later, right? So now the company grows with the trust and they put the risk in with the trust. From a legal standpoint, the setting up of the trust has to have about $3,000 in reserve to the trustee company. That's to make sure that the trustee company can defend and do all the court things that are necessary to be done if the trust comes under attack. That's a law, right? So there's no way around that. So in part of the fee that's there for setting up the trust, that legal requirement is met where the trustee has to have, $3,000 in an account so it can, manage the trust. But the ongoing fees, especially for the generational wealth stuff, is ridiculously small and it grows with the trust. So it gives an incentive to grow that trust as quickly and as stably as possible. Make sure that trust grows as stably and as quickly as possible, then you're not making anything. So that incentive is there to make sure that the trustee does right by you. So yeah, so that's how that works. How does it work on asset protection? That's a fixed percentage of the entire account, which is how all asset protections work. Because asset protection people are rich. You have to have assets to protect in order to do an asset protection trust. So all asset protection people are at least rich. Most of them are quite wealthy. So that's just a whole different ballgame. Yeah, I mean, some people are kind of talked into it. You don't need an asset protection trust. What typically people need, even if they have like $1 million house, right? Because typically when you're doing an asset protection trust, it's everything beyond your primary residence, so that wouldn't even count, right? But let's say you have $1 million house, you have an antique car, you have antique Rolls Royce or something, or whatever, and your net worth is not including your primary residence, your net worth is like $2 million. You probably don't need an asset protection trust, right? So you probably don't. Now, it depends on what the assets are, I suppose, but you probably don't need one. So typically what the folks that need asset protection trusts, their assets are coming from litigious businesses, right? So if you have a business that's sued often, if you're a doctor, right, and there's medical malpractice and you get sued often, if you have some sort of highly litigious, business that you're running, and that's where your assets are coming from, or if there is an environmental risk, right? Like if you own houses, but the houses you own are in Tornado Valley, or they're in a place that's known for wildfires, and that type of stuff. Or if it's just real estate at all, right? People slip and fall down the steps. Like it's highly litigious to have people in and out of your property where you're responsible for them, and any injury is gonna, go against your property insurance and all of that stuff. That's pretty litigious as well, right? So you'll know that. You'll know that if your money comes from a place where you would be sued quite often, right? And then you're making a lot of it, then maybe it might make sense for you to go ahead and do an asset protection trust, offshore asset protection trust. But that's really a conversation that you have to have with your legal team, your local legal team, and you want to have with your local tax team if they're not the same people, and they probably shouldn't be, right? Just as a matter of conflict of interest. So your legal team and your tax team are the two people that you really want to talk to about that locally, and then go from there. Because I'll give you examples. We've had people that came to us and put their home in another country in their offshore trust, right? And then something happened where they went to court, and the trustee did what they were supposed to do, and blocked the judgments. They lost a creditor judgment, and the trustee is there blocking the judgment. They don't have a homestead exemption on that house, and da 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 da. And at some point in time, it's like the judge kind of like got the shits of it, and ended up coming in and just like seizing the property because the property was in the judge's jurisdiction. So now how do you undo that seizure? Well, the owner of the property has to show up before the judge, right? And file whatever documentation, and whatever motions in the court to remove the seizure of the property, especially if the seizure wasn't exactly legal, right? But in order to say, hey, this was an extra legal or an extrajudicial seizure, you're not allowed to do that. Motions have to be filed, and so on and so forth. So what they were attempting to do was they were attempting to get the representative, of the trust, the trustee, to show up in their jurisdiction so they could compel them, right? Because the property was in their jurisdiction, right? Different jurisdictions are going to operate differently. But that's why you still want to talk to your local people, because our lawyers are Kenyan lawyers. They can give you all the Kenyan legal advice in the world, but they have no idea. They might be able to get versed on federal, and like treasury rules and treasury laws and federal laws, but they are not taking the time to get versed in Rhode Island law, right? And then even in certain places, like we have a few clients from, was it Prince George's County? Prince George's County has additional rules on the county level for land, right? So there's been a few folks that they did like land trusts, in Maryland, and then in order for them to, some of them were putting their properties in LLCs after equity stripping them, right, to do some stuff over here, and then having the LLC owned by a domestic trust. There are special rules for that in PG County. So their local legal teams and all of that had to get involved and make sure that they met all those special rules to do. And that was a county level. It's not a Maryland level thing, right? So even somebody who maybe has passed the Maryland state bar still might not have an understanding of how things are done in Prince George's County specifically. So your local person is super important if you're doing a bunch of stuff on that side. Typically, our generational wealth trust funds, they're not that complicated because there are no U.S. assets going into them. That's why they're non-grantor. A foreign trust is typically assumed to be a grantor trust, which comes with a whole heap of IRS filings, right? So if you want to know what that's about, either ask your person or go to the IRS.gov. Up in the corner, there's a little search bar. Type into the search bar non-grantor trust to see what it says, right? But when it's a non-grantor trust, you don't have to do those filings until a U.S. citizen gets a distribution from the trust, right? And so what ends up happening in this situation is those bonds are Kenyan treasury bonds. So all of the money that's funding the trust is coming from Kenya, right? So it's a Kenyan trust. Money funding the trust is coming from Kenya. The trustee is a Kenyan corporate trustee, and the beneficiaries, it could be you, depending on the breakdown of it. But typically it's your kids because it's a generational wealth trust, right? And so until those kids get their first distribution, it's a non-grantor trust. You can't touch it, right? That's one of the big kind of tests. The control test is one of the big kind of tests if it's non-grantor or not. You can't touch it. You set up the trust deed, so you were in charge of how the trust works, but you can't reach into it. You can't touch it. It's a generational wealth trust. It's designed to create generational wealth, right? So you're not touching it at all, and none of that money is coming to you at all. Now, how do we maintain that if you're relocating here, right? So if you're relocating here and you're going to use the trust to pay for everything, then it becomes a matter of, well, who owns the house, right? Because the trust is paying all your basic, needs, right? So it's paying all your bills, it's paying all your taxes, paying for your groceries, it's paying for all that stuff. So who owns the house? Do you own the house, or does a company own the house that you're the majority shareholder of, right? So then we get into nitty gritties on strategy and all that stuff. Or depending on what you got going on, it might make sense to make it a grantor trust, right? Because there's something called foreign dividends received deduction. Foreign dividends received deduction. Again, go to irs.gov, type it into the search bar, see what it says. But if your C corp, and only your C corp, not your S corp, not your LLC, unless it's taxed as a C corp, but your C corp, if your C corp owns 10% of a foreign company and holds the shares for 365 days, right? Then the dividends from that foreign company that are paid back to your C corp may qualify for a foreign dividend received deduction of 100%, right? So there's no taxes on that money that flows back. So if there's no taxes on the money that flows back, does it matter if you have to do a bunch of extra filings? It might not. That's why you got to talk to your local professionals, your local CPA, your local attorney, to figure out on the U.S. side of things, what's the best way for me to proceed? Because some people that already have C corps that own their LLCs, because C corps aren't the greatest, structure to hold like rental income in. But if you got a bunch of rental incomes all over the country, and you got a C corp that umbrellas them, that owns all the LLCs that own your rental income, it might make sense to have that C corp now own the limited company here that owns your property, and then that way you can push back the dividends from the trust up through the company, right? It'd be a distribution from the trust to the company, then dividends from the company to the C corp, and that all gets to the United States tax exempt. And on the Kenyan side, the dividends to the beneficiary are tax exempt up to 10 million shillings per year. So every year it resets, you get another 10 million tax exempt. So if you got professionals and you can strategize your way through it, I'm tax exempt in Kenya, I'm tax exempt in America. You know what I mean? Now we got our strategy together. But you can only do that if you're dealing with your professionals on both sides. Now, if you're moving here, you don't need both sides per se, because now you're a tax resident of here. You want to make sure that you're not a tax resident of there, right? So it depends on what you left behind. If you have a house that you're Airbnb-ing out, you got to talk to somebody back home. You still got assets, back home. There's a lot of folks that move here with no assets. All right, cool. We can handle the rest. We can make sure that we build up enough of a case that you're not even a tax resident in the state that you came from anymore, because they'll try to get you sometimes, right? And then you still got to file, as an American, you still got to file a tax return every year. You just don't have to pay anything, right? If you're permanently relocated, there's something called a foreign earned income exclusion. It excludes the first $130,000 a year of foreign earned income, right? There's something called an FTC, foreign tax credit, right? It gives you credit for 90% of the taxes you paid in another country against any tax liability you might have in the United States, right? But how do you qualify for these things? That's where you need your professional. You need a local professional that understands your tax situation. Nobody on any of these TikToks can give you a straight answer to that because we don't know your situation. Anyone who tries to give you a straight answer to any of that stuff is a liar. No one can tell you how it's going to play out for you until you sit down and actually have consultations with the professionals, because none of us know your actual tax situation. And even if you tried to give it to us, in the comments, ain't enough characters for you to type it out. All right, we would not know your situation until we sat down and actually looked at it. So on this side, we have enrolled agents, U.S. certified enrolled agents. They're actually also U.S. citizens, all of them, right? Who can handle that from this side if you didn't have a pro in the United States to handle it for you. So they step in and they handle some of them. One of them is a JDEA, which means that they're a tax attorney, right? So they're a JDEA, but not a CPA. You can find JDEA CPAs, right? But you want to make sure that you're not going to a proctologist when your head hurts, right? So you want to make sure that the experts you're using are experts in international tax, not just some H&R Block individual who's probably not even a CPA, right? So you want to make sure that they understand things like form over function. You want to make sure that they understand things like arm's length deal. You want to make sure that they understand international concepts, not just local concepts, right? That makes sense. Beware of the gurus, guys. Beware of the people who act like, oh, this is what you do. That's not the way this works, right? You gotta have a professional in every location, in every jurisdiction that you're in. We are professionals here in this jurisdiction, right? And we're professionals in this jurisdiction because we're vertically integrated. We have our own law firm. We have our own CPAs. We have some EAs on the team for the American side for people who, fully move here. We have our own architects. We have our own general contractors. We are fully vertically integrated. All right, so we own our entire supply chain. All right, our entire integration chain, I should say. We don't own the companies in China that supply us with, materials for construction. But we have that vertical integration. We do not own any U.S. Law firms, and it wouldn't even be worth it for us to do so, because we would need a lawyer in all 50 states, because we have clients from all 50 states. That's actually one of the things that I love about living here, is it's just a national government, right? So it's almost like the entire government is one state, and the word state typically means country everywhere else in the world but America. So, you don't need a bunch of different lawyers for each county because each county has different. No, there's one law. So one attorney, can handle that thing everywhere. But even us, our attorneys specialize. One of the cool things about the equivalent of the bar here is that you can look up an attorney, and it'll show you the percentage of the type of cases that they've lodged in court, right? So you can walk into a law firm and be like, oh, I want to buy some land. Can you help me buy some land? And the attorney be like, yes, right? Here's my fee note, right? Pay me. I'll help you buy the land. But you can actually look up that attorney on a free public online database. And when you look it up, and it says that the attorney has been does 90% criminal defense, and it'll have it in a percentage: 90% criminal defense, no real estate law, no estate law, right? Then all right, I just went to a proctologist, but my throat hurts. I probably should find the specialist for my throat. I should probably find an ear, nose, and throat specialist, right? So that's actually pretty impressive, because even there are some states in the United States that don't have that. You can go see if they have a bar license, but you can't see what kind of law they practice, on the bar's website. Here you can. You can see exactly the split of what kind of law they practice. So our chief of immigration law, it's 80% immigration law when you go to her profile, right? That's what she does, right? Then there's some contract law and stuff like that, because that goes hand in hand with what she's doing. There's some import law because that goes hand in hand in what she's doing. When you do your immigration, you might send a container filled of your household goods, right? So that you have your stuff in your new house. That goes hand in hand with what she's doing. So as long as it makes sense, right, then it's okay that there's other laws in there, right? Our real estate law, our lawyer, our chief of real estate law, she has estate planning because that goes hand in hand with real estate conversions, right? So it'll say on there, it'll say that she does contract review like 10%. It'll say that she does land conversions like 10%, and that she does like estate planning and real estate law like at the high like 40% and all of that. So it'll make sense, right? So it's really, really easy to get the right kind of lawyer here because of that. So that's pretty cool. As an estimate, how long does it take to construct? 9 months. Yep, 9 months. And for folks that like want to immediately come over, we have partners that have that have like apartments that they can stay in if they want to come over immediately. But most folks, it like lines up. Most folks are not like, look, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. Most folks are like, I'm tired, I'm ready to leave. How do we do it? And then they're like, all right, cool. I'll have my affairs in order, by the end of the year, and then I'll show up and my house will be done and all of that. And their house is typically done way in advance of that. So yeah, 9 months for that one. Now that also changes again, like somebody had asked about the base thing. We just had a family of 12 come through, and we set up 7 different buildings for them, right? So they had 5 houses between all the adults in the family, and they had a barbershop salon that they wanted built on the property. We did tennis courts and an archery range for them, a basketball court for them. We did all of that on like an acre and a half. So that took longer. I mean, you know what I mean? So for up to 4 bedrooms, it's 9 months. If we're doing a whole bunch of other stuff, then it might like that. I think took I want to say 18 or 16 months, right? So it just depends. It depends on how much we're building. But these standard like houses, they take 9 months. Yes and no. Yes and no. Can we rush it? Yes. But the no is there's a slab for every floor and the roof, right? So there's a slab of concrete for the first floor, and that's like the floor, right? And then the ceiling for the first floor, which is the ground floor for the second floor, is another slab of concrete, right? And then there's a slab of concrete that's the roof, right? So the no comes in because when you pour the concrete slabs, you have to wait 27 days minimum for the concrete to harden. And then we test it with something called a rebound hammer, right? So you can look that up. But we use a rebound hammer to test the density of the concrete and make sure it's the shrink that it's supposed to be, that nobody, stole some concrete, added some more sand, and you got any theft going on or anything like that. So there's no way to speed that up, right? So that's 3 months. If it's a 2-story house, those are 3 slabs: the roof slab, the second floor slab, and the first floor slab, right? And when slabs are curing, the water has to touch them, right? So you can't make all of them at once and like whatever, right? So that's 3 months of slab curing, right? So there's only so much rushing that we can do. But I mean, yes, could we hire 3 times as many masons after the slabs are cured to be able to, yeah, we could do stuff like that. It just costs more. How are utilities connected and secured? Solar, gas generated, solar/gas generated. You can definitely do a solar off grid. That is an upgrade. You can do solar off grid. Typically, there is a line from the electric company that hits your house. There are blackouts from times, right? So all of our clients have either a solar backup, which is a bit more expensive, or a diesel generator. So like just the other day in this area, announced that like something happened to the grid and the entire coast was knocked out for about maybe 12 hours, right? None of our clients even noticed because their backups turned on automatically, right? So, the entire coast was knocked out of power, but all of our clients either had a solar backup that kicked in because there's the batteries. If you got the solar thing, the batteries store energy and power the house, or just had a diesel generator on the roof, which automatically kicked on and powered the house. So we got every time that happens, we get a bunch of emails. Hey, thanks. The backup is really working. I didn't even know the power was out, but I guess I got what I paid for. Da, 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 da. So we got a bunch of those yesterday, because those backups are typically things that people will upgrade to. The diesel backup is not a significant cost increase. The solar is. It's a full system, right? So we got to wire full solar panels and all that to the roof and all that. We got to make sure that however much wattage you're using, the solar can handle that, and then we got to set up the batteries that can also handle that, and find a place for those batteries and the blah 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 blah. So it becomes like a design edition because now the battery area is actually designed into somewhere in the house and all of that stuff. So that is the more expensive option, but it's kind of the smoother option because what happens if you run out of diesel, right? Right? Or if the generator went off the last time and you didn't refill it, and then you have another, power issue or whatever. So it's definitely the more sustainable option. But a lot of folks do go with the diesel generator, and then they, we'll come back later and do the solar, whether that ever happens or not. Right? So that's what it is. Especially here, right? There are some places like if you're in England, solar probably sucks. You know what I mean? Like there are some places where it's like, well, do you even get enough sun to be talking about solar? But here we're on the equator, so we get 12 hours of sun, 12 hours a night. We perfectly split, and we're at the beach, so we get good sun, right? There are even cloudy places here. I'm sure not as cloudy as England, but in cloudy places here in Kenya. So it definitely depends on where you're going to be sometimes as well. And then you have to have enough batteries to cover whatever length of time you want, right? So if you want the batteries to cover all 12 hours in the worst case scenario type of situation, and that's technically not the worst case scenario because you could have a power outage that I guess it would have to happen exactly at sunset, right? And then you got these 12 hours overnight, and then the next day it's a cloudy day, right? So then what, right? So you set up as much battery power as you're comfortable with, and a lot of our folks do have solar systems with a diesel backup anyway. So if you can afford a diesel backup, doesn't necessarily mean you can afford a solar system. But if you can afford a solar system, you can definitely afford to add a diesel backup to it. So. Are there other options? I mean, yeah, there are. There is geothermal depending on where you're building. Um, that's way more costly though, but the option is there. There's actually, if you look it up, I don't know if you Google it or YouTube it or whatever, but there's actually a Bitcoin mining. I don't know what you call those rig production. I don't know, but there's a company that mines Bitcoins, and it's 100% geothermal. So they're not paying for the electricity that they're using to mine the Bitcoin because they're tapped into a geothermal fissure. So look that up. That's a pretty interesting situation. So it's almost like they're mining Bitcoin for free. Obviously they had to buy the computer stuff and all of that, but most people have a hefty electric bill who are doing that as a business. They don't because they use the geothermal. So some interesting things that can happen there. The other options are there's hydro. There's a guy who has a really solid agribusiness. It's not just a farm, like it's like a full-on agribusiness. And he uses something called a sequential batch reactor. And so the sequential batch reactor can actually take wastewater and it sequences it through in batches until it's actually drinkable, right? So you can go all the way to drinking water from, wastewater. He doesn't take it that far. That's the most expensive version of a sequential batch reactor, but he gets it to the point where he can reuse the wastewater as like gray water. So gray water you can use for crops, right? So he's actually able to do that, and then he has like a hydro system that's kind of connected to that, where he can use hydro backup. So there's all kinds of things that you can do, but as far as like cost straightforwardness, diesel and solar are the most straightforward. Like we couldn't even give a cost on the sequential batch reactor. We had to have the engineers come out and like figure out what kind of like land it is and how deep can the batches go and like all of that stuff. So you can do those things, but it's not a clear pricing formula for it. Wind, yeah, you can do wind. You can do wind. That wind tends to work better when you're closer to the beach, though, because the ocean breeze never stops. Right? So the ocean breeze. I've never been at the beach, and there's not a ton of wind blowing in off of the ocean, but about an acre and a half away, it's already gone. Right? So you need beachfront, to really be able to take advantage of that, or be up in the mountains somewhere. So again, it's like terrain stuff. So the stuff that's like doesn't really care about your terrain is solar and diesel. But you can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? It's your place. You can do any combination of things as well. Which utilities do people actually people's biggest utility is normally internet. So most of our clients, they have a Kenya Power hookup, so they have like an electrical hookup, but they have some kind of backup running, and then beyond that, their water is essentially well water. It's called a borehole, so they have their own personal borehole, so they don't have a water bill. We use mostly bioreactors, so they don't have a sewage bill and they don't have to pump out a septic tank because the bioreactor kind of like takes care of it, breaks everything down and like whatever, essentially just goes away. So you got to talk to the engineers if you want specifics on how a bioreactor works, but you don't have a sewage bill. So there's no sewage, there's no water bill. If you have agricultural land, for now, they're trying to change the law, but if you have agricultural land, which most of the land that we get into is classified as agricultural, then there's no property tax. So you don't have property taxes, you don't have a water bill, you don't have a sewage bill. So a lot of our clients, they have an electric bill, they have an internet bill, they have like Netflix or something like that, and then they buy food, every day. And some people are planting, but they're not planting all their food typically. Like we'll go get like onions, potatoes, collard greens. We have sugar cane, we have papaya, avocado. So there's like stuff that we can get from like our little, and we just have like a little garden essentially. We have it's like a half an acre of whatever, whatever my wife feels like planting. And so, but obviously we can't just like live on that, right? We have corn as well. So some people will like supplement like whatever they're growing in their garden, and then they'll go to the farmer's market or they'll go to the supermarket, whatever they feel like works for them, and buy whatever other food that they're getting. So their food, their electric, their internet, their Netflix, like their entertainment stuff, those are their bills. You know what I mean? So that's it. There's not a whole lot to it. Then most people will get some staff. Like I have a bunch of living staff. I have a governess for my son. I have a gardener for the farm. I have a security guard for the farm. Um, I have my attorneys that are on monthly retainer. Who else do I have? I have a vet that's on monthly retainer for my three soon to be four dogs. What else do I got going on? It's part of my monthly budget as far as employees are concerned. We have an on-call driver. Who else am I paying? Oh, we got a delivery guy gets paid daily. So his contract is a daily contract. Um, Anything else? There's a security guard here. So yeah, I mean, there's quite a few people. I don't spend 100,000 a month though. So that kind of puts into, perspective what the monthly, budget is. What's a good monthly budget for a single male coming from the 50,000? 50,000 will cover everything. That's why we made that our base for, our package. 50,000 will cover you, and you won't spend it every month. And of course, you'll actually make more than 50,000, depending on the bonds. But you won't spend it every month. There'll be months where you do, but you won't spend it every month. Yeah, I mean, if you work with us, that means you already have a house, right? Because the house was part of the package. If you had to pay rent, now there might be something funky going on there. Because if you had to pay rent, 50,000 might be your rent, right? So now it's like another 50,000. But if you already own your house, who you paying rent to, right? So it's like getting rid of rent, and now you're just doing your monthly, budgeting and all of that stuff. So. And 50,000 is a high rent, right? Like 50,000, most Kenyans are not paying, especially a single male Kenyan is not paying 50,000 for rent, right? But you may not want to live like most Kenyans, right? So even though they're not paying that, you might not be built to live the way they live, and so you're still probably going to pay a little bit more than what they would pay in rent. But I mean, your rental maybe 30,000 as a single male wanting like, you know, amenities that you're kind of used to, maybe 30,000 if you're paying rent. Once you get to know the landscape, your first place is probably going to be 50,000 no matter what, because you just don't know what the prices are like. But maybe you can get down to 30,000. But if you own your own house, like I just explained, you're only paying your electric bill, your Netflix, you know, um, maintenance, maybe like whatever maintenance you're putting into the house and all of that. That's all you're paying for. So 50,000 goes a long way once you own your own place. Yeah, I was paying rent on a, what is it? Three bedroom, a two bedroom by the beach. It was like 90,000 a month, right? So, you know, eliminating that 90,000 a month, you know, but I needed the extra bedrooms for because I have like I had living staff and all that stuff, right? So if I, once you don't have to pay that rent, then cost of living is reduced dramatically. You just get more bonds, or like whatever your income, whatever your source of income is. Like, you don't have to quit your job. You know what I mean? Most people don't. Some people do, or some people have jobs that like there's no remote option or whatever, so it's like they have to, whatever. That's fine. But the people who don't have to typically don't. Then it's just bonus money coming in. So it's either you got a 50,000 cushion, but you also have a way to sustain yourself and you maintain that, and you're golden, right? Or if you don't have a way to sustain yourself, but you're tired and you're ready to move, then you align your budget with the 50,000, or you, right? And you don't have to double it. You know what I mean? You can just say like, look, I need a little you know, let's, let's do a little bit more. Let's do 20% more or something like that. You can do that. But you can get enough bonds where you're getting, yeah, as long as you got the money, yeah. Yeah, so we were talking about a family of 12 that came through, and so it's inside that family of 12. Some of them are kids or whatever, but there's the son who like leads the family. Mom needed her own house. There's two sisters and like an irresponsible brother who doesn't lead the family. So like there are five houses like on this family estate or whatever. They needed more than 50 because they wanted to cover everybody like with the bonds. So they needed significantly more than 50K a month. And so, but they had the money to do it. They pooled their resources, and so they had the money to do it. And so for them, I want to say they're doing something like five. What are they doing? 5 million a month? Is it 5 million a month? Which I don't want to say their name. Yeah, I think it's 5 million. I'm just gonna say 5 million a month. They're doing 5 million a month. In my account? No. No. I got you. You mean like when you do the program, is it deposited in your account? Yes. Yes. You own the entire, either you or your trust, typically your trust, whatever, but you have control over logging into it and all that. So you own your entire account. So you can log in and look at it at any time or whatever the case might be. And you can just have it come to you. There are plenty of people who are like, forget that. I want it to come to me. I want it in my name. I will deal with the risk of, if I'm in a car accident and I lose the lawsuit, that they can come after my bonds and take them from me. Like they'll just deal with that risk. So those folks that have it in their name like that, they can obviously just log in. The folks that it's in the name of their trust, they can still log in typically. And so you'll just see like your bonds. There'll be like a portfolio view of all the bonds that you have and when they're going to pay out and what they pay, and they just pay directly into your bank account. Now if you have the trust, it might pay into the trust account and then come out of the trust account and go into your account, and that doesn't matter. Why? Because like we said, the specific types of Kenyan trusts that we use have a caveat in the law that distributions are tax exempt up to 10 million. Right? Now, that family that's doing 5 million a month, that was a little bit different, but it's 10 million per beneficiary. As a family of how many? 12, right? So even there, you got 10 million times 12, you might even be able to make something work there. But that's why for most people in general, they're not doing more than 12 million coming out of there, so they ain't got to worry about taxes. So there's no problem. Sometimes when you add a layer like that, there's a tax problem, right? Because now you've created a taxable situation from one entity to the other. But because of the specific type of trust that we use, one of the features of the trust is that you get that tax situation where it doesn't matter. Hey, he can come. He can come. You can bring him for a minute. Hi. What's up? You had a good sleep? You want to say hello? Yeah. Say hello. Say hi.
Hi.
You ready to go see Auntie Shadow? Is she going to take care of you? She's going to get you some breakfast? Okay. Okay. Go have fun. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. But yeah, so yeah, it just depends on what you got. To get like 1 million shillings a month, you need like $100,000 per. Let me think. I think of things in shillings. You would need, if you wanted 1 million to come out of it, you would need, yeah, about 100K. Yep, about 100K, but not necessarily, right? You got to remember the first time you set it up, like, so when you set it up as the base, there are fees in there, right? You're not setting it up for free, right? So there's brokerage fees, lawyer fees, CSD fee, like there's fees, right? So as you increase, it doesn't double, right? Because those fees aren't paid again. Like the fees to set it up are only paid once, right? So as you increase, it doesn't double. So it actually probably be closer to like 80K, somewhere in that neighborhood, than it would be to 100. But yes, that's a good way to think about it. And then you're pleasantly surprised in the end. But that goes to show you what you can do with a bunch of adults that come together and pool their money, right? Because you had 12 people there. Yeah, some of them were kids, but you had, a decent amount. I think it's like 8 adults in that 12-person group. 8 like adults with careers and stuff, right? So they were all able to pool money and put themselves in a damn good position. 5 million a month for the next 10 to 20 years. They're sitting real pretty. We had a barbershop do that too. It is kind of better when family does it, because when it's family, you can tap all kinds of things. Like grandma tapped the 401k and like they pulled money out all over the place, right? It's not like they're Bill Gates, you know what I mean? But because they're family, they were tapping all kinds of stuff. But when it's like a group of friends, then it's a little different. Sometimes like there was like a straight up barbershop group. Like the guys were at the barbershop, cutting it up or whatever, and just the owner of the barbershop the one day was like, why don't we do this? And the guys were on board and they put that money together. They actually approached us as an LLC. So they actually had put their money together and actually formed an actual physical company. And then one person was like the representative of the company, and they approached that way. And that was cool because any kind of and all of that, right? So any of those issues, they were able to handle on an individual basis because they were able to use the pass-through ability of the LLC to assign different things to different members, right? So the tax situations of each member was completely different, right? So that was cool for them, and they approached that way. But I don't think they were like dipping into like 401ks and stuff as a group of strangers. Whereas when that family came through, they tapped everything perfectly, and they all knew each other, so they all knew who was dependable, who wasn't dependable. They knew who could file a bankruptcy, who could do a reverse mortgage because grandma was in the picture, who could do this, who could do that, and so like they all came together and did what they had to do and are living fabulously, right? So if you can get family to make the right move, you can do some pretty cool things. Yeah, I think they even had like two, like the guy who kind of led the family. He owns a janitorial business. He was able to do a Chapter 11 like Donald Trump, so he did a corporate bankruptcy. And then like one of the sisters did something where like she ended up doing like a personal bankruptcy. Both bankruptcies are done. They're both bankruptcies are already discharged and they're like good to go. So, but they worked with the bankruptcy lawyer in the United States locally, and all of that first. So like we have no idea how that's going to work. We don't file bankruptcies or anything like that. You got to deal with those people. But yeah, they're both they're very well off now here, and they don't have any debt hanging over them because it was discharged. How often do people? A lot. It's not half of the people, but I would guess like 30%. 30% of our clients will fund it with a bankruptcy strategy. The typically though the strategy is like legit. Like they try to do something, the thing they try to do fails, and then so like that guy, he was going to bring. They have some formulas that he uses in his janitorial business that are actually patented. Like they made their own cleaning solutions. He was going to send like the powder version of the chemicals here, and then like add whatever the arsenic or the vinegar, like whatever the liquid add in is that makes that special solution here. And there's a thing called KIBS, and there's also a thing called NEMA. So KIBS is like the Kenyan Bureau of Standards, and NEMA is like the EPA, and they didn't allow it. So he had a whole business plan, like he was going to take the corporate loans and like expand business and da 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 da, and he legitimately was attempting to do that, and then it got shut down, and so then he filed bankruptcy, right? So it's not like you can't really be on some like I'm going to file bankruptcy, like I'm gonna do this with the intention of defrauding essentially creditors, because if that's the mindset, that's what you're doing. It has to be I'm going to leverage debt to make a legitimate move. I'm going to legitimately attempt that move. And then statistics say that there's a really good chance that I'm going to fail. They knew that when they gave you the debt. Like everybody knows most businesses fail, right? I can't tell you how many of my previous, ventures have failed, right? So everybody knows that's how it works. So you got to take that legitimate, attempt. But then if it goes wrong, the safety net is bankruptcy, right? But you want to have those consultations in advance and be like, look, I'm about to roll the dice. I'm about to leverage, this credit and or this debt in order to do this thing. And we're gonna really make a good faith effort of it. But if it doesn't work out, what am I looking at here? And have that bankruptcy attorney get into it with you and really let you know how that needs to work, and possibly let you know what a good faith effort looks like. Like, what do you need to do to make a good faith effort, right? Because I know with these guys, that was a big thing where their bankruptcy attorney had like the pre-consultation with them, was like, okay, this is what you need to do. These are the records we're going to need. This is what we need to show. It's actually called the trustee, the federal trustee. So this is what we need to show, the trustee when we go to bankruptcy court to prove that, like, no, you didn't just try to defraud creditors. You really tried to open this business or expand your company, and it didn't work out. So now you need to do a corporate restructuring, bankruptcy at Chapter 11, is what he did. That might not even be what you do, right? You got to talk to that legal professional to figure out what it is that you do, right? So that's how that works. Planning just matters. Planning just matters. The weird, like, do it yourself or jump off a cliff people. I guess they're adrenaline junkies or something. I don't even know how they live. I would have an ulcer and die. All right, I gotta understand what's happening and how we're going to do it and how we're going to make it happen and rock out that way. But the more you plan, the better off you're going to be, right? So the more you plan, the better off you're going to be, and the cheaper it's going to be in the long run. People typically don't plan or don't pay the professionals to plan to save money, and they cost themselves so much money, and then they're embarrassed, so they don't come on YouTube and they don't come on TikTok and talk about how they screwed up, right? Instead they'll act like, oh, these people are corrupt, these people took advantage. No. Start asking them questions, and watch it crumble real quick, that they went in there and tried to do their own thing with no professional assistance. You didn't know the laws of the country, didn't know what they were doing, and they scammed themselves, right? So it's really, really important that you do it the right way. But definitely the people who do it the right way get the best results, and in the long run, it's way more cost effective. How long does it take to get citizenship? 7 years. 7 years to citizenship. So we typically set up a plan the whole way through. So when you onboard with us, you get access to this like online database thing. It's like a customer portal, right? Or like a client portal. And when you get into that client portal, it has a breakdown of everything that's happening. You can contact our legal team, you can contact me, you can whatever, you can talk to all of us in that portal. And so you'll see when you get in there, it'll already be set up for first renewal, second renewal, citizenship, right? That's the breakdown that's going to be in the portal if you come on a permit that has a path to citizenship. If you're using a permit that does not have a path to citizenship, it won't say that. It'll say first renewal, second renewal, third renewal, residency, right? So it'll be a different breakdown. So if you come on like an investor permit, you have a direct path to permanent residency. If you come on an ordinary residency permit, you have a direct path to citizenship, dual citizenship. You do not have to give up any other citizenship to be a citizen here. All right, that was an important factor for us when we were deciding which country to even come to in Africa, right? Because some of them are, whew, they ain't all the same. It ain't Africa. There are countries in Africa. They ain't all the same. You mentioned, I think that's asset protection. You do in other. Oh, so you've been here for a while. Okay, yes, I did mention that. So which countries? Which countries do we? Okay, so typically, if the person has 1 to 10 million in assets, we'll use the Seychelles. And if they have 10 to 50 million in assets, we'll use Mauritius. If they have over 50 million in assets, we'll use the Cook Islands or Nevis. And if they are essentially creating a trust to be used in response, which is a bad trust, all right? A trust that's going to be used in response to something happening is going to be deemed an invalid trust by the court, okay? There's only one country in the world that will allow you to create a responsive offshore trust and then fight the U.S. government and the U.S. courts when the U.S. courts say that trust is not valid, right? You're still going to have some serious problems. But there are certain people who are willing to take those risks and all of that. We haven't really had to deal with any of those people ever. But there's only one country that you can do that in. And then that country makes it ridiculously difficult for anybody to essentially challenge it. And so there's a lot of folks that are sitting in jail, sitting in federal prison, but they have trust in that country. And when they get out, the money's still going to be there. So, but like I said, we haven't had to do any of that. So that's typically what we do. Now, there's a bunch of other things that we do within our generational wealth. So passport portfolios are one of them, right? Which a passport portfolio gives you access to different countries as a citizen, right? So you get additional passports and you become nationals of additional, territories. And the number one reason for that is to access their central bank as a citizen, right? So that's also part of it. Where you start, moving in those areas. But eventually, what ends up happening is, as you build your passport portfolio and as you build your generational wealth trust and all of that, you'll get to a point where you need a structure called a family office. And then once you get to that point where you have what's referred to as a full family office, so you start with a micro family office, then you might switch to a multi-family office. And then you switch to a full family office. Having a full family office is like having a Wall Street broker that only works for you. All right, it's not cheap, right? And once you do that, one of the best territories to do it in is Singapore. So the vast majority of our clients that have gotten to that level, we then set up a Singapore family office for them. And then 10 years later, they sacrifice a member of their family's passport portfolio because in Singapore, you have to give up all other nationalities to become a Singaporean. And then that member of the family ends up running the full family office from Singapore as a Singaporean, right? So that ends up helping the situation where, like, now their family office is amazing, right? And so that happens. But it has to be worth it. Like, Singapore makes it worth it. They give a ton of benefits for those folks who come in and open those family offices and then become Singaporean. There are other countries that are like, oh no, you got to give up your citizenship to get citizenship here, and it's not worth it at all, right? Like Tanzania. That why would you do that? It doesn't make sense, right? So, or Tanzania, depending on how you pronounce it. So why would you give up your UK or your US or your Canadian citizenship to get Tanzanian citizenship and get nothing in return for that at all? And then, as a Tanzanian citizen with children who are not Tanzanian, they're not allowed to inherit your land. Like, there's all these laws that just work against you. So it doesn't make sense. So when you're doing stuff like that, it just has to make sense. But yeah, all those things are like down the road evolutions of generational wealth. They're all wealth evolutions, quite frankly. So rich is the easy part. Rich is just having that passive income that's more than your monthly burn rate, right? So long as you have more passive income that you're not working for than your expenses, you're rich. Wealth requires stewardship, which is the hard part. The money is the easy part, but the stewardship is the hard part. So a lot of that stewardship requires extraordinarily strategic planning, which is where passport portfolios and private family offices and all of those things come into play. And that's how wealth is essentially built. Hopefully that answered the question. I think I probably went beyond the answer. Yeah, yeah. All right. Good morning, Betty. Oh, that's an interesting question. What do I miss most? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I miss anything. What do I miss most? I can't think of a thing. Uh-oh. I don't miss anything. Um, is there a food that I miss? Oh, pan-fried catfish. There was some really good pan-fried catfish places. Now I'm from Philly, so I'm sure like in New Orleans and Louisiana and all that stuff, y'all got some other stuff going on down there. But yeah, no one cooks catfish out here. So pan-fried catfish. Um, Oh, and chewy cookies. There's not a lot of chewy cookies here at the beach. They exist in Nairobi and all that, but all the cookies out here are like your hard cookies. So I like the chewy chocolate chip cookies and all that. So that's it. That's it. Good question though. I hadn't thought of it, but there's nothing else. There's nothing that I had in Philly that I don't have here except for those two things. No one here, particularly in this place, does pan fried catfish. I'm not even sure if catfish is here. And there are no chewy chocolate chip cookies. I can make them myself though. You know what I mean? The cookies anyway. I don't know if there's catfish here. But yeah, there's nothing that I had in Philly that I don't have here. Drive. I have a car. I have multiple cars. Yeah, driving is not an issue. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, there's no Trump. Yeah, there's that. But yeah, no, I can't think of anything I had in Philadelphia that I don't have at the beach. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not talking about you can find it in Nairobi, which is the big city. I mean, like everything I had access to in Philly, I have access to here at the beach. I can't think of anything. That was a great question, though. What about shell shock? Shell shock? I've never been to war. You mean culture shock? Culture shock. Okay, so one of the culture shock things is actually that things are natural, and it's not like oh my god, this stuff is great natural. Right? That's not the shock. The shock is you don't know how long things last. That's the shock. So, like in the U.S., in Philly, there was this like bread that I would buy, called Petridge Farm, right? So it was like potato bread, and you could get, there was one called Swirl, and so it was like a cinnamon, raisin, bread, and it's all right. So they have these kind of like custom breads, craft breads, right? And so I could buy a loaf of cinnamon raisin, Petridge Farm bread, and put it on top of the fridge, and come back a week later and open it finally and put it in the toaster, and you know make some toast or whatever, come back a week later and finish it off. And if I let it stay to like the third week, it might start getting moldy, right? Like that's the way bread works. But I could freeze it and like keep it for 6 months. Right? Right? Okay, fine. That does not work here. So if I buy a loaf of bread on Monday and I have not finished that loaf of bread by Thursday, I have a loaf of mold. Right? That's the way it is. So what you're used to grocery shopping wise, I guess because of the preservatives and all of the stuff we use in the United States, that's not going to be the same situation when you do grocery shopping here. So we essentially, like, remember I said I have a delivery guy on staff and he gets paid daily? That's essentially all he delivers. He essentially delivers groceries daily, and gets paid daily. So whatever, the chef is deciding to cook for that day, um, she's going to make a list. She's going to send it to that delivery guy. They don't even ask me. I just get like a bill. It's like, which is fine. That's the way it's set up. But she's going to make a list. She's going to send it to the delivery guy. Delivery guy goes shopping, brings all the stuff home. The food gets made. I eat. It is what it is. So yeah, stuff are bought essentially daily. Now, salt, of course. You know what I mean? Like those types of things last, forever and whatever. Your sauces and things like that, are going to be like once a month buys or whatever. Oil, rice, like your dried out stuff, whatever. But even that stuff goes bad faster. Definitely goes bad. Like I remember like being able to get like spaghetti and use it a month later or even 2 months later, like it's not past its expiration date, right? Like the dried hard, spaghetti or whatever. But I try that nonsense here and like the weevils come out. You know what I mean? Like there's the little bugs, in which, I mean, I've seen that in the United States, but it was like you're cleaning out your cabinets and there's a sealed box of lasagna that's a year old and like the weevils are in there. You know what I mean? It's not a fast situation. Whereas here, in a month or two, them weevils might be out, in the sealed box, like, which is a standard thing everywhere. If you leave rice, you'll get the same thing even in the United States. And again, I have seen that like in the United States. But it's one of those things where you forgot the bag of Uncle Ben's, in the back of the kitchen cabinet for a year, and then you get in there and there's weevils in the bag. Here, that happens a lot faster. So we must spray things with some kind of preservative, in the United States that stops that from happening. And it happens even in like the freezer. Which is interesting because I was talking to one of my engineers, like one of the construction engineers, about it years ago, when it first was a culture shock to me. And I was like, but even in the freezer, man, like what's going on? And he was like, have you ever been to Alaska? And I'm like, actually, I have, And he's like, all right, so if you go for a walk in the woods in Alaska, how come like the woods isn't filled with like squirrel corpses and owl corpses and like just animal corpses all over the woods in Alaska? It's just like the same temperature as your freezer. The snow's all over the place. And how come it's not stopping down the biological breakdown of those animals? And I had never thought, like, that's such an easy right? It's such an easy just method of like thinking it through logically, like, oh yeah, duh. If that was the case and freezers work like that, then in all of our frozen tundras, there'd be corpses everywhere of all the animals that just naturally pass in the frozen tundra. Like, why doesn't that happen? Because ice does not stop things from breaking down unless you add additional chemicals, right? So it's one of those things where it's like, oh duh, like I actually knew that. I had just not taken it to the logical conclusion of what's going on in the world. So yeah. I noticed weevils at wife's aunt's home in some grains she put in my hand. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you try to hold grains too long, that's it. They're in there. They're in there. And over time they break the grain down as well. So you get a completely different, grain if you let them stay in there too long. So yeah, we buy smaller amounts of things and we use them essentially right away, and we just buy more the next day. And even in doing that, we still spend less. Like I guess in the U.S. we think that Sam's Club and Costco and whatever bulk means more cost effective, but not so much here. So yeah, good question. That was biggest culture shock I think was the food's breaking down naturally. It's not a bad thing. It's just a culture shock. Healthcare, yeah, healthcare is on point. Yeah, healthcare is on point. Kenya is technically the second best healthcare on the continent, but I always say it's the best because the first best healthcare is it's technically South Africa, but there are areas where the private hospitals that have, the specialized equipment that are actually whites only, which is crazy. But there are places like Arania, you can look that up. There are places in South Africa that are still on that bullshit. And so because of that, I always say it's Kenya. It's not, they might technically have the top level, but I don't think it's available to everybody. So as far as it being available to everyone, it's Kenya. It seems extra buggy there. Is that because of the water nearby? What do you mean? What does that mean? Oh, shoot. I see that you asked that before. Sorry. I didn't see the first time you asked that question. You mean me? Like me, like swiping away stuff? like the flying bugs? Yeah. Nah, it's the same as like Jamaica. Like this is super tropical. So and it's really really fun. I keep forgetting to like make a video of that. It's really funny because abundance makes everything act differently. So like flies will like eat your salad, but they won't. Like if a dog pooped, on the side of the road in Philly, there'd be flies all over it, right? Like we even got sayings like flies on, you know what I mean? Here, the flies will be on like the lettuce, and they'll leave the poop alone because there's abundance. Like they have stuff to eat, so they don't need to eat poop, right? So it's really interesting when you see like bugs and stuff here. The stuff that they choose to gravitate to is the stuff that like they don't touch in the United States at all, which is really really interesting. But yeah, it's like a Jamaica type of situation with the now there are mosquitoes, but they don't bother me too much. But it did rain last night. And so yeah, when it rains like that, then you'll get like a fly increase. The other thing is, and some people figure this out the hard way, your septic system will have something to do with that as well, right? So if you got a bad septic system or you bought a house instead of building a house and you don't know what kind of septic system they're using and how they built it, then there'll be like almost like seasons, like fly seasons. And so folks sometimes learn that the hard way, where like the way the property was designed, or you didn't have lawyers do the due diligence, and so you don't realize that you're living on top of a former dump, right? And so then that wasn't disclosed, and you bought the property and built the house on top of a dump because you didn't do your due diligence. Or like a former slaughterhouse where there's a bunch of carcasses buried underneath your house, you know. So those are other kind of little things that pop up that will affect, you know, what's going on with your land and what's happening with, you know. But I'm 1 acre away from the beach. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's water nearby, and it rained last night. So there's certain, you know, times where you're not gonna see, you know, the whatever, the me swatting stuff away, and then there's other times where, especially if it rained the night before, they're not even all flies. Like because it rained, they're like winged ants, right? So like when it rains, like the ants grow wings. Same thing used to actually happen in the Philadelphia area actually, but yeah. Then there's other places where there's like nothing. Like when I lived in Key, there were no mosquitoes. I think there's flies everywhere, you know, whatever. But there were no mosquitoes at all in Key. Now somebody had told me that they had just like sprayed by air and like killed all the mosquitoes or whatever. So, you know, maybe I just came at the perfect time or whatever. But the entire time I lived there, which that was the first place I lived, and that's like out in the bush. It's like out in the mountains. The entire time I lived there, there were no flies at all. Also, oddly enough, so this is how we do. All right, you're over here. You're on YouTube. So this is how we do like Windows. So you see, and I'll show you TikTok guys as well. But since he asked, I'll show him first. We do all of the windows in all of our houses just like this, where it becomes like a mirror for some reason, and I don't know if it's like mating or whatever, but the flies hit the mirror all the time and like fall off of it. So I don't know if they think they see like another fly and it activates something. This is what I just showed him. So this is how we do all of our mirrors. They're one way mirrors or windows. They're one way mirror. So from the inside, no one can see you, or from the inside, you can see everybody outside. From the outside, nobody can see you. They just see themselves. But for some reason, that it seems to attract the flies. They keep like hitting the window. Oh, sorry. Facebook, you can see it as well. So this is what I showed TikTok and YouTube. All right, so this is how we typically do all of our windows. They're mirrored. I don't know why. Maybe there's a veterinarian or something that can explain that. But yeah, that happens often. They hit the window and fall over. Yeah, no, definitely CEO. That's our thing. So from the outside, people only see them. So you can literally be standing inside the house looking the person who's like coming to knock on your door. You be looking at them and they can't see you at all. So you can be naked in your house if you want. Nobody's going to see you. Right? Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. They typically do. The big ones, it like knocks them out, and then they start like they come back to life. But the little ones, they do unalive themselves by flying right into the window. I don't know what that's about. Birds don't though, so it's not like you got birds crashing in. So there's no damage. The only thing that flies into the window are flies. Yeah, you can. That's part of why we're at a tourist area as well. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, can you make money in U.S. dollars here? Yes, but it's typically restricted to tourist activities, and then you want to charge those tourists like as a package, like before they leave their home country, type of thing. So a lot of Airbnbs are able to do that. But only in places like this where it's a tourist, area. So, We have now these are really, really, really nice. But there are Airbnbs actually right down the street. You could actually see the top of them from here. Let me see if you can, I'd have to go up on the roof to show you. But we have these really nice Airbnbs, you know, a football field that way. They're 5 bedroom though. They're really nice. 3-story, 5 bedroom, in suite. But they go for like $550 a night, right? But they're super nice. You know what I mean? They each have their own private pool, blah 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 blah. So yeah, you can do that. Have to have an investor permit to do that though. Can't just work in someone else's country without a work permit. So if someone hires you, you get a work permit. If you own your own business, you have to get an investor's permit. There is no permit to like invest in stocks and bonds. I know people hear investor's permit, that's what they think. But you can just buy stocks from anywhere, you know. Even if you need like some kind of citizenship, then you just get a brokerage account and let the broker buy whatever, right? But if you want to own the business, you need an investor's permit. Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. All right. I have been here for 2 hours, 55 minutes. Any other questions? Any questions on what we do? Can I go over the end of year special again? Yes. The end of year special includes your immigration, all your legal compliance, includes a 50 by 100 plot of land here at the beach, includes a approximately 1,600 square foot house built new construction for you here at the beach, includes your bond waterfall, which would include 6 bonds of at least 1 million local currency each, that will pay out every month, and a trust fund to manage it all. So you get all of those things. That special is priced at 185,000 USD. Yes, you can upgrade to a car that would turn it to, well, I guess it could depend on the car, but that'd bring it up to right around like 230. Yeah, it depends on the car. It might be less than that. I just say that to manage expectations. Yes, if you upgrade to a car, then we will convert your driver's license from whatever country you come to a Kenyan driver's license. Yeah, our lawyers will handle all of that. That's fine. Yeah, it's all. There's nothing for you to do, right? Our lawyers will handle everything. So the only thing you need to do is move into your house. Yeah, it's a full like concierge service. But that land is here at the beach because it's all of those things have been pre-priced. So if you want to live somewhere else, then you just get a different price point. The beach is cool. Yeah. No, I mean, I think so. I think the beach is really cool. Here, particularly at this side, we have a situation where there's really not too much like crime out here. So that's why I'm raising my little son here. What's up, Chief?
What was that job?
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. Are you gonna be like grinding?
Eh?
Are you gonna be like cutting metal? What are you doing right now?
Or to fix the back.
Oh, you're putting the rail on the balcony.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not a problem. I'm almost done here.
A little bit.
Yeah, give me 5 minutes and then you can start. I know it's going to be loud. I'm closing this up now. Thank you. No, you're fine. You're fine. All right. So, any other questions? We are installing a metal rail on the balcony, so they're about to start doing that. So, any other questions? Any other questions? If you're typing a question now, just go ahead and type it, and then you can finish up later. I will wait for you. If you are about to send something up, just press 1, and I'll wait for you. Other than that, it has been 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 45 seconds. We're heading towards 3 hours here. So we will end the live. I am live every day at this time. Yesterday I was live at this time, but we had some crazy technical issues, so you probably did not see me. And I know that the upload didn't go to YouTube, so sometimes there are technical issues, but I am live every day at this time. All right. Looks like we're good. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. I will be live again tomorrow, right around this time, and we will talk about some other aspects of generational wealth in Kenya and relocating to Kenya and all of that stuff. If you want to start the conversation and you're serious about making this move or doing generational wealth, then just go ahead and set up your consultation. The link should be in the bio, and I will talk to you guys soon. All right, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you tomorrow.